Welcome everybody to Wu-Sabat Outformation Classes UK, brought to you by All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. Thank you, Harat M. Habab, for the introduction and hosting. As I say, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. What we're going to have to do, because we usually do a poll, there's some reason it's messing around, so I'm not going to press that button to avoid any potential issues. So if there are any issues with sound or the visuals right now, please put those comments in the chat and we'll address them directly as we move, because we're not going to have to vote on that today, just so that it doesn't crash the system at this particular time. Okay, so we're going to get started with a cultural presentation of Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. We are Sabians or Musbatu in our language, and in order to start off the class positively and for us to connect with our ancestors and existence, we're going to say a short affirmation. I'll say in Sabaic first and then translate into English for full and proper understanding for yourselves as the audience today. Abdoi kale namazurat u fakur ame kasam un empa paut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa paut u kale ashuk kawun jawef neya anuki kasam un empa paut u pa paut kawun kasam un em neya anuki wahu ame pa paut u pa paut kawun wahu ame naya nakuk kadur naju ame kasam un empa paut u habub ame mushahas un nakuk kadur kawan kale pafef nakuk dayur jawef pa paut ame wase ame dayarni kawun lakay bakoy jawef pa paut anuki abed bi nafashni pa paut kawun anuki pa paut kadur nakuk kadur pa paut amul nakuk amul. Okay, so let's translate that back for you. So we said, begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all. I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am a part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was a cultural expression, as I say, known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, the affirmation, and it's something that, as I say, us as Sabians say on a regular basis to remind us and say that we are part of existence. Any questions on that please ask. Now, just in terms of the induction, if you join us for the first time on Zoom, we have your audio settings here to the left. And so if you need to adjust your sound for any reason or change the type of device that you're using, then you can do that using that option. If you have any messages for us that are not questions, then please select via the chat. You've got two options there, hosts and panelists and everyone. If you can select everyone for us, and that makes sure that your messages are seen by everybody in the chat. So if you could do that, that would be grateful. So that's any feedback. It could be, I don't know, the sound's not right, things of that nature. Place that in the chat area and we'll pick those up accordingly. So feedback about the class, positive, negative, whatever, put that in the chat for us and select everyone. The next option there then is for us to be able to, or for you to be able to ask questions to the class. So my name is Nabab Katni. I am a student teacher. I'll do my best to answer your questions today. And there's two ways in which you can do that. So you can raise your hand, and that allows you to come verbally in and ask a question directly. What will happen is once you raise your hand at the appropriate time, I'll ask if there's any questions, and then Hara M. Habab, as a facilitator today, will basically press a button and it will make this message appear on your device, and you need to unmute yourself when you get that message, and that will allow you to speak into us directly and ask your question. As a result of that, we give you the permission then to unmute and mute yourself. So if you can, just make sure you stay muted after you've asked your question, just to not disturb the rest of the class. But if you've got any follow-ups, then obviously please feel free to ask that in the same way by raising your hand again and then waiting to be called. If you've dialed in, then those options are *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Again, you'll be prompted, so you just need to unmute yourself, or give us permission for you to unmute yourself once prompted. If you're not confident or don't wish to ask a question verbally, then you can do so via the Q&A button, which allows you to put a written question in, and then again, similar to the verbal questions, at the appropriate time, Hara M. Habab will ask that question, your written question, on your behalf. Again, if I've not answered it clearly or correctly, or you want more detail, then by all means feel free to put a follow-up question in there in relation to what you're saying. So don't sit there in ignorance. This is a question answer session, although it's around a theme. So the only real reason for doing that is just to make sure that you go away mastering or learning something on a specific theme. I can sit here and answer questions, as we've used to over many years as students and the master teacher, jumping around, but obviously you're in a day and time where you need to master certain things. So we did that in order to prove ourselves in a certain arena for a certain time, and now we're in a day and time where you're learning about your stuff. So hence we tend to focus on a particular area or an issue, and we only veer away from it if it's relevant to the subject that we're talking about today. So don't sit there in ignorance. It's an interactive session. We've got obviously people in the Zoom chat and people live on Facebook. If you are live on Facebook, we're not picking up questions directly, so we're not monitoring the Facebook page live. So if you do want to come into us directly, then by all means join us on Zoom. The link is in the chat area. But if you want to stay on Facebook, that's not a problem. We'll pick up those questions after the session. So don't sit there in ignorance. Please use the options available to you to ask questions so you're clear on what is being expressed. Okay, not going to press the poll button today because it seems to have a few gremlins in there. So we'll leave that. If there are any issues with the sound or you can't hear me correctly, etc., then please just put that in the chat. And as I say, we'll address that in a live fashion as we're doing the class today. Yeah, and if you should be able to see this screen. So some of you may be on some mobile devices, and sometimes you have to swipe left or swipe right, depending on your device, to move the screen along so that you can see what's being displayed. Understood. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick introduction and a quick overview of part 1 of Freaks and the Perfect Creature. That is on the YouTube channel. So the one that was done, I say, it was maybe a couple of months ago now. So maybe people are not as familiar with what was being expressed there. I think we had to reschedule part 2. So by all means, go back to part 1 and go over that in some detail. But I said we'll cover it a little bit, but it's quite a bit to get through today. So I'm not going to go over it unless there's specific questions asked in that area. Now, in starting off correctly, we are a matriarchal nation and tribe, as aligning ourselves with natural nature, which starts with feminine forces first in that regard. I mean, all of us here, as obviously human beings, all came out of a feminine, despite uh, people seeming to change the reality of that in this day and time. And you know what I'm talking about. A lot of controversy getting in the background around that. But we've addressed that in previous classes, so by all means, take a look at some of those areas where we're looking at gender. But in this particular instance, as I say, we've always been matriarchal. And one of the things, obviously in England, I think it's Black History Month at the moment. So therefore, there's a lot of introspective learning, one may say, that's going on at this particular time. And so when you're talking about individuals who are born, who have made a significant impact in the world, in this case, we are talking about Dr. Malachi Z, York, or Cran, as the founder, I suppose, of our organisation, United Sapiens Worldwide, inspired certainly this class today, and the book that we are dealing with today, Freaks and the Perfect Creature, was authored by him. It's important to understand who their mother is. And so, you know, we as Sabians, and as people who are Black people, I suppose, like our Nadu Negroids who are finding out about themselves, one of the things which you look at in the mirror every day is that you have colour. And when you look up from the earth and you look up in the sky, at what they call nighttime, which is really shadow time, because the earth is in a state of shadow at that time, just doesn't happen to be outside the planet, just doesn't happen to be facing the sun. When you look up there, you see pure blackness. So the universe into the dualverse, triverse, multiverses, and everything, we say omniverse, is mostly darkness. Understood? And so therefore, we shouldn't be ignorant of what takes place in the dark. So if you think about it in the evolution, certainly of European society, you think about when a woman was pregnant with a child, the technological limitations meant they couldn't see what was going on. So you knew, for example, when the woman was pregnant, when she started to show, and there was a lot of mystery then surrounding that particular area. Obviously, modern technology through ultrasound has enabled us to look inside the womb and see what's going on, but it's not giving us a window into everything that's going on. Hence why there's a debate in the world today on what is life. Understood? And certain human beings have decided what or what isn't life. Understood? Yeah, they're not necessarily in touch with what nature says, but what or what isn't life. The point that we're making is that Wu-Sabat and the master teacher has taken time for us to now peer into what is taking place in the darkness, i.e. the cause that cause and effect. So when we're looking at a leader or a teacher, in that case, master teacher, in that case, yes, the fact that the person standing there, they must have had a mother and father, and their mother and father, and so on and so forth. So who you are, at least physically, and who you might maybe are certainly as an aspect of your personality and how you're raised, is going to have something to do with your origins and your source. Understood? So we acknowledge that as a matriarchal society because we came from those feminine forces first. And even when we talk about gender in terms of physicality, feminine, or what they call asexual, so they talk about asexual reproduction, but the Holy Tablets in the first chapter addressed this particular point for us factually and said asexual reproduction is really F-sexual reproduction, because F-sexual gave birth to what you call bathanoid or neutral gender, hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, and male gender, understood, all came out of female. Yes? So when we talk about before we had emotions or energy became into motion, so if you looked at that Partak Yud Yes, it says the all does, I do. Well, that does is referring to the fact of in that absolute of all, yeah, you can't add to it, you can't take away from it, you can't define it, understood? Because defining in itself is limiting. Yeah, we talk about all, well, you're talking about motion out of stillness. Yes, motion out of stillness. Now, excuse me. So energy itself was birthed from a state called basic energy. And obviously, basic energy is difficult for us to comprehend because it doesn't have any movement or motion, and it doesn't impart force. Yes, but that is female in origin. So for our understanding. So out of the feminine or that darkness, say motion was birthed, and then things became detectable in time or space and time, obviously, including matter, triad sort of principle there. So before we had motion was that darkness, and we're peering back into that darkness, or we should certainly be contemplating walking back into that darkness, because that's where we came from, the world of things before there was some things. Yes, and as you well know, because we beat almost every class, yes, the so-called invisible world or the world of darkness makes up 90% of existence. The visible universe makes up only 10% of existence. That 90% then breaks down to 76% dark energy and 24% dark matter. So the importance of us understanding or knowing about these things is because these patterns then obviously repeat themselves over and over again in nature, and then are reflected in obviously the physical world around us. But you are designed to see better in darkness, and in actuality your being is from darkness, understood? We're just, as I say, interpreting or existing at the moment in this physical world. And so that perception of it is just a small part of existence where we're dealing with that so-called light energy, colors, so on and so forth. That we come from blackness. So all of that is to say the importance of the sacred feminine, understood, and acknowledging that as all human beings should, irrespective of race, you understand, or gender, they should acknowledge that fact. And so what one may class as chivalry in that regard is need to be redefined, because it's not to do with acknowledging that women are weaker than men, or you understand, need to be sort of led by men in some situation and respect. It's just respecting the fact this is the source of life, and if physical life as we know it, and the reality of the situation is, if you want to be aligned with natural nature, then you build your systems in sync with that, understood, to make sure you're in tune with your ancestors and in tune with wider existence. So Mary Abra York, also known as Fatima, is the mother of Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, Dr. Malachi Z. York, Okran, and you see they're born March 10th, 1929. Here is her in her clan mother attire, acknowledging as our Shabat or tribe is matriarchal, like many of the ancient tribes before the influence of the Anunnaki, which changed certain societies to more patriarchal, as I say, leadership, origin, and thinking and principles in that regard, which again permeate the monotheistic religions today. So here you see it in the clan mother attire, and then she's obviously transitioned now. Her daughter, Imamta Muqtarat Tumraye, has now taken up that seat of the clan mother for the Sabian tribe, and as Yamasee as well, Native Americans, as well as say us. Our origins clearly in Afafraya or Africa. So not to leave out the sacred masculine, significantly important as well. As we see started off as hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, but then broke out as part of Project 24 into a single or unigender beings as male and female. And so we come together as male and female in order to produce life. So Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi is the master teacher's father, F-Adhia, or F-E, you see that there, father. And as I say, was necessary clearly in this process, a significant individual from a well-regarded, well-renowned family out of Sudan. Unfortunately, was assassinated before he was able to really live the fullness of his life in 1970 by forces connected to Haile Selassie at that time. So obviously a very contentious issue, but nonetheless, he gave birth and played his part in giving birth to this great individual. And both of them play a significant part in the saving of our race today, or provide the solution for our race today. Yeah, so as you can see there from the lineage here, said he's Al-Hadi Al-Mahdi, his father, his grandfather there, Sayyid Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi, and then probably the most prominent individual there, Sayyid Muhammad Ahmad Al-Mahdi of the Sudan, known as the Mahdi. So the guide, 1845 to 1885. So check out that book, the guidance, if you're interested in all of the history on that side of the master teacher's lineage. Now here is him at age 25, Isa Al-Hadi Al-Mahdi, as he was known then. And as we've talked about in this class many times before, in the renewal of our story, that is not done, well, solely, I suppose, or done certainly from our culture, by digging up the bones of our ancestors. So our story is renewed by way of something called outformation. We do outformation, that is dealing with things outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And so we're dealing with outformation coming into the realm of the planet here. And when it comes into the planet's arena or area, then it is known as information. Beneath the sea is known as beneath formation. And so that process of renewal, which does tie in interestingly into the class today, in terms of the freaks side of things, yeah, the question is that why aren't these monotheistic religions that claim to have this direct connection with God, why are they not continually being updated? You understand? Obviously, because one of the reasons that is because their doctrine is dead. All of the people that they mention in their books are dead. They're no longer living, in a sense. So this is the real book of the dead, not falsely called the Egyptian book of the dead, which is really the coming forth by day. So interesting enough, I think it was an article this week, look it up if you're interested, where the Catholic Church are going through a process of updating their doctrine to include women priests, gay, lesbian issues, etc., etc. So they're going through some doctrine update, understood? So what will be interesting to see is that, all these Christians and Christianity gave birth to Islam, etc., what they now have to say about a living doctrine or updates. Does that change its reality now then? So everything that was said before, is that not real? Yeah, and then if they're updating those aspects, then how come it's not a holistic aspect that God is doing? Because God must have known that the individuals who translated the Bible from its original language certainly didn't have the knowledge and capabilities that we have today. Understand? And this is the issue in dealing with freaks and perfect creatures, is that when you ask an individual, for example, does a unicorn exist? Yes, ask a Christian whether a unicorn exists. If you ask a so-called Judahite or Jew today, does a unicorn exist? Yeah, and we know that the Torah gave birth, and the biblical books gave birth to Islam today. So let's include the Muslims in that. Does a unicorn exist? Does a creature, for example, with 7 heads and 10 horns exist in the Book of Revelations? Do these things exist? Yeah, I'm going to show you in the next part of this class and go through these various different creatures which are supposed to be myth, but you're saying that this is the word of God. So if you ask them, they're going to say no. I don't believe in unicorns. Unicorns are not real. I don't believe in mermaids. I don't believe in mermen. They're not real. But yet, these creatures are in those books. Yeah, the book, the 7 heads and 10 horns. Yeah, they didn't write a book like the master teacher did. He had 22 chapters. Remember those old blue Revelations books, breaking down the Book of Revelations, each chapter in Galilean, in Greek, understood, and then pages explaining all of the symbolism that book meant and broke down. Then to top that off, he then went and wrote another book called the Injil, where he put it in its kind of scriptural form for everybody. Those 22 books of, each of them probably, 300-400 pages each. You understand? So times that by 22. The Christian world didn't do that. They have all the resources, all their money, all of their researchers, etc. They didn't break down that book word for word and break down the symbolism in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even today's time. It's not been broken down as comprehensively as it was done by this individual. So they have to explain, yes, 7 heads and 10 horns from the book itself. They have to explain unicorns. They have to explain griffins, mermen. They have to explain these things. They also have to explain, understood, whether their God is an extraterrestrial or not. Because if at certain points he arts in heaven, and then at other points he's here on earth, then what is he? Or it? They've changed it to a he. Then what is he? Yeah, because if you ask them again, do ETs exist? What are they going to say? They know it's not real. Yeah, but your God was in heaven at one time, yes? And they'll say he resides in heaven, but then Genesis chapter 11, did he not come down to the earth? See what was going on? So what is it? So these are the principles which Freak and the Perfect Creature was walking us through to say, okay, you're saying one thing, but then the book is saying something else. Understood? So which is it? Or what is it that's actually real? What we're going to do today in part 1 is just go through what is sitting behind some of these, some of the symbolism and the lies from our perspective as Naga-Nadu or Negroids, yeah, from our culture, what was taking place, what is going on, because we showed, I think, in a reasonable way in Lost Records of Time and the Tuli Papyrus, how the game obviously has been played, where a number of stories, individuals, factual events, etc., have been lifted from our culture and then retold. Places, names changed, places changed, you understand? Dates and times changed. Yeah, and it's caused monumental confusion for us, which is known to us as the spell. And in order to break that, you needed to have a combination or a solution that dealt with that. So, and hence why I refer to as the master teacher, because he's a master at teaching. And there was I'm not going to quote the actual thing, but it was a Sabian brother in a interview recently that I saw with a Moorish organisation, not attacking them or anything of that nature. But the person asked, the individual from the Moorish nation asked the person who considered himself to be a Sabian, who is Dr. Malachi ZK York to you? And the individual responded and said, well, he's our master teacher. And the person responded saying, is that a prophet? Is that a god? Is that a messiah? And then the person said, well, no, he's a master teacher. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but is he a prophet? Is he a messiah? Or we heard one of the guys say that he was a god. So is he one of these? Now, the issue is that he told you what he is. You understand? And the question that should have come back was, what is a master teacher? Yes? If you don't understand what it is, you say, okay, well, what's the master teacher then? Can you define that for us? But the person didn't do that. They went to the programmed responses, which the word Messiah is not our word. Now, the word Messiah comes from ancient Egypt, but in its current form, how it's used, that's not our word. The word God, that's not our word. It doesn't come from our culture. It's a German word. We're not German. Now, does it go back to certain principles that we looked at and we read in last week's class, we'll say 2 weeks ago's class? We read to show you that basically when we talk about deities, etc., in that regard, they're principles that are used to help us to study ourselves. We don't worship images or statues or things of that nature. They are there as principles to teach us about who we are. So you can see that the program is there so that when new information is introduced, new information, not old information, new information is introduced, we still revert back to those old religious teachings and principles, which is what we learned here in this society in the West. Yeah, and Africans were not running around with Bibles and Qurans predominantly. Somebody brought them over to them, by way of invasion. So they didn't naturally have those books or that information. Somebody decided, well, we're going to civilize them. And so therefore, they brought religion to them, or that version of religion to them, which, as you understand in our doctrine, that monotheistic religion makes us subservient to other races. This is why it's problematic. Yeah, it's a virus in our thinking and how we perceive the world around us. And so a certain combination was needed to address that. And so in 1970, officially, yes, a combination was brought, which was obviously a physical and etheric combination. So our etheric ancestors, who the Egyptians referred to as the Parnatharu, but their name is the Morozaku, and the providers, basically formulated a combination understood in 1945 and allowed that to manifest itself in 1970 in the form of Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, and incarnated by a being who they referred to as El-Khadir, or the Green One. Yeah, so this is a way in which our ancestors throughout the ages incarnate and then teach us as human beings what we need to know in order to facilitate our ascension pathway. Yeah, because we are their children, or as they refer to us as their children, and they've left an ascension pathway, how to navigate through existence to become what they once were but are now. We're seeking to become what they are, understand, but they understand what they once were, hence why they're referring to us as their children, understand, in that sense. And the fact, obviously, they created and gave birth to us in that sense, or were responsible for our existence. So that combination was needed in those first symbolic 30 years in order to address the virus, which is known today as monotheistic, which had basically permeated our being. And in that example, which I just gave you, it shows our thinking. We're not really thinking correctly, understand? Because when new things are introduced, understood, we challenge those new things, but yet we never went through the process of confirming any of the old stuff. So the stuff that we were given, we just accepted it, known as belief, understood, and blind faith. We accepted it without a kind of interrogation. We accepted it without any investigation, understood. So we accepted it in ignorance. A lot of people, because it's been around for a long time. Others, that's what my parents were into. Others chose an opposite religion to be rebellious against their parents. But it's still within the multiple choices of what the Kakasnadus in the Western Hemisphere produce and then spread around the world. So that may work for them and their people. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a solution that works for us. Understood? And this is the issue. So a combination was needed to address those religious degrees. And once that work was done, say, I took a long walk on a short path. So up to the year 1996, where, as I say, the Holy Tablets was produced as the bridge between religion and reality, then it was necessary, as I say, for a new combination to come to the fore now, which would then focus on teaching our stuff, which would be present from or presented by or known by Tarak, which means the way, and actual facts, which will be dealing with the actual facts, moving away from some of the symbolism and teaching you, well, this is what actually happened. Yeah. Prior to that, we were dealing with knowledge and information, which would be described as the antidote. And the reason why it's called an antidote, because it had some of that virus, that poison of the monotheistic religion in there, because that's where we were at, that's where we were coming from. So a combination of that was used in order to give you or correct what they had taught, but also at the same time give you some of the real ancient Egyptian mysteries at the same time. And the methodology of doing that as a master teacher that was determined was for you to experience those schools directly, live them so that you know them well enough, understood, and then when it came to show you, well, this is learned the truth about it now, or how it's corrected, so it was truth at that time. Here, let me walk you back and show you where it really came from, understood? And so that journey of immersing oneself within that doctrine obviously gave great knowledge. And what that means is that when you've come out the other side of it, you can speak to a lot more different people on this planet who are of those religions. And you don't have to be necessarily disrespectful, even though you know it's not our truth, it's not even truthful. It's come from, as I say, facts or things that happened in relation to our culture, which obviously is now spread around the world, and people have taken it and interpreted it in their own way, shape, or form. Now, that new combination that was necessary was, as you see on the screen there, Dr. Malachi Z and the being known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, incarnated in the being. So this combination is known as an that method. So that is basically our ancestors using a vehicle or vessel in order to speak through or convey certain information necessary for our development this day and time. And this is our way. Hindus have a version of it called an avatar. In Islam, they say ila mutajasid. So, as I say, they use words like divine, etc. As I say, they could be controversial in terms of their use. However, what this is saying is that outformation, understood, or the feminine forces of natural nature determine at a certain point, in order to correct the state of where we are, that they will send teachers in to the environment in order to set the record straight. So this is why you're dealing with this combination in this regard. Understood? So it's important that one understands how we do things, as opposed to what has been taught to be done. Yeah, but how we do things. Yeah, our cycles go back thousands to millions, into billions, into trillions of years. Yeah, and what's relevant to us is this 24,000 year cycle at this particular day and time, because it's the renewal of our story. Yeah, and the combinations of individuals who have been born, as I say, to set that record straight. So one of the things of walking through those various different schools or degrees is that some of the prominent individuals, teachers, maybe you may call them, some leaders, etc., are not necessarily separate. Yes, they only appear separate. But what they didn't realize is that each one of them was bringing a piece of the puzzle in order to teach a very hard-headed Garnado or Negro people. Understood? Hence why you see the statement here, don't make me holy so you can find holes in me. Understood? I told you I'm a teacher. I didn't say I was a holy person. You understand? So we may have put on the cloak of what you consider to be your definition, yes, the European definition or monotheistic definition of what a holy person is, so that when the person makes one mistake, that's it, you're done, boom. Now in this kind of council culture, boom, one mistake, you said this, that, you're done. Don't matter how much good you've done in the world, you're done. Understood? Now, some of the issues which have come to light in the council culture, some of them may be worthy of you lose your job, whatever the case may be. But when it comes to what we need for our race and the various different characters here, people have fallen out on what the person has done and destroyed organizations on what they perceive the personality of the individual has done, as opposed to what the soul is doing, i.e. the works that were carried out in terms of addressing people for many years. And always, or most of the time, it's usually done by way of the six or sex force, isn't it? So as you think about with the story with, but the events surrounding Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X or whatever, had a problem with the number of wives he had, because he's obviously coming from a perspective where he's raised in the West, where his art was one woman. Now, whether we agree or disagree with what's taking place in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's bedroom, the question is that was it worth bringing down an organization that was generating $70 million in the 60s per year, just by way of an internal market, so black people buying and selling to each other? That's a significant achievement. If you're going from the 30s, where Honorable Elijah Muhammad was dealing with pimps and prostitutes, the criminals of society, I say, and reformed them with a doctrine and built a cohesive organization for that time, that gave the appearance of an Islamic organization, but supreme wisdom is not Islam. Yeah, supreme wisdom is not Islam. Muslims today are not clean shaven; they have beards. Muslims don't wear suits; they wear jalabiyas. They certainly don't wear bow ties. So there's an appearance there of doing one thing, but feeding them something else. You understand? But you can see the power of pulling down something because people are caught up on the personality, not on the soul. You understand? So he spoke to me wrong, or he did this to me, or he did that. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, well, what is the person teaching? What are they doing? Etc. Etc. What have they achieved? Yeah. So the fact of the matter is, and as you're going to see, as we walk through some of these things, as I say, maybe more in next part to this one, of even then, people are attributing all these different attributes to this so-called God, which they're now using to bring down so-called leaders, not because you're a leader or teacher, whatever the case may be. It's because the way they've got it in the system, if you teach about Jesus, yeah, then they're expecting you to be a certain way. If you teach about Muhammad, then they're expecting you to be a certain way of their ideology. But the question obviously is, well, who is this God? Because if beings were created in the image and after the likeness of these individuals, yes, and in Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, it said, man became like one of us when he knew good and evil. Not good from evil, good and evil. And he became like God, according to their story, when he done an evil act, according to God. When he deceived, he lied. Yeah? Yeah, he tried to hide due to shame. Yeah, so in doing those things, it became, you understand, he became like God. It's something to think about. Just so we explore a bit more detail in part 3 of this class. So when it comes to adding new information, the issue for us is that when new information is being taught or sought, we as Nagarnadu or black people always want a source of confirmation that oftentimes is, generally speaking, outside of our own race. So if the white man can confirm and say, hey, you see what you guys are saying about the genetic kiss, and someone sees it in some documentary, then it's true. You understand how many individuals here are speaking this information in certain arenas, and then someone's asking for, rightly so, someone's asking for confirmation or proof or show me. Not a problem. But did you do that for the opposing belief that you're holding? Did you do that same interrogation? Have you done that same work? Have you sought that confirmation? One individual, I won't mention name on this particular platform, but challenged in the Right Knowledge series, the Master Teacher introduces a system that basically determines who a person is by their hair texture. Now, the person's argument against it was, well, when you go to the biology book, it doesn't have that image in there of 9 ether and 6 ether. That's when you go to their books, it don't say what the Master Teacher's saying. So the issue there for us is, well, who said the biology picture of the hair texture is correct? There are many pictures in textbooks, on websites, different things, which you have to understand, that is the person's interpretation, oftentimes, of what is taking place biologically in terms of hair texture, for example, of what is taking place biologically. And they might draw an image, they may label certain things, etc. Does that make it factually correct? Well, you wouldn't know unless you do the same interrogation as they're saying to the Master Teacher to say, well, you're saying that hair in a black person or a person with strong genes, it comes out the follicle and curls into a 9. A person who has weaker genes doesn't have hair, they have fur, and it comes out the follicle and makes their fur comes out the follicle and it makes a 6. Now, the point being made is that anybody on the planet can create their own system of describing hair textures. And today, hairdressers have done exactly that for Negroid hair, so-called Negroid hair. Yes? And they've labeled the different textures of hair from wavy to tighter curls, and they've introduced a system. Now, have they been taken to task about, hey, that system you've introduced, which is basically, let's be honest, it's for hair texture, a lot of the time, to destroy the hair, because putting relaxers and different things on it. It was done for that reason. You understand? So, what strength of relaxer to use, how to take care of it, so on and so forth. But it wasn't to enhance it to go to the stronger direction. It's more to deal with it going in the other direction. And they introduce their own system. So the argument that it's not in the white man's books is not a good argument, because they've been known to get many things wrong, or things evolve in the scientific world, and the textbooks stay exactly the same. Yeah, like the fact that, as the Master expressed, they're still teaching hydrogen is the first point in existence, even though they know about quarks, biaps, seals, overstood, etc. So these are the points we made where we have to now get into the real, we have to start thinking again as Nagarnadu, and this is what this doctrine is forcing you to do, or teaching or reteaching you to do again. It's to think, obviously, then on into reasoning and get those abilities back again, so that you question everybody. You don't just question the person who told you to question. You question everybody. You come with that mentality for everybody and everything, because that's how our ancestors moved. And at a certain point, they definitely wasn't listening to somebody. Not to say they was ignorant like that, but they wasn't listening to somebody who was outside of their tribe, and outside of their nation. That would be, automatically it's going to be a red flag. I need to check that individual more, because they're not of us. We now are in the complete reverse of that, and spend a lot of our time protecting the Mokasu. So the person that, or race of people that, I suppose, throughout history has been recorded as causing us the most trouble, let's say the last 6,000 years more acutely, causing us the most trouble. When they get into trouble, we run to defend them. And which is from Gad, one of the sons of Jacob. Which, when you look at the word Gad, G-A-D, you look at the word God, G-O-D, and you say the word guard, G-U-A-R-D, guard. It sounds more American when I say it now, guard. It's the same phonetic word. And how monotheistic religion trains us mentally, to guard them, protect them, die for them. This is a sickness and it's a disease, which Wu-Sabat was designed by a master teacher to deal with. So that you would develop and learn the strength, or gather the strength of an individual to correct oneself, a self-help tool that would then give you the strength and the abilities to be able to work with others. Yes, because the reality of the situation, their religions, or Za'amat, understood, yes, it helps them to unify, at least mentally. So they're perfectly unified, but it allows these different races to come together under their original religious culture and come together and work together mentally. Yeah, and so we didn't have that. Hence, it had to be brought to us, because what was being given to us was not of our own making. It wasn't even of our own origin. It didn't come from our culture. And the science, or the secret of us as Nagarnadu, I'm going to use their religious term as the master explained it, so that we understand what we're talking about. But it said, God cannot be God and be in need. Because once God is in need, God is no longer God. And so once you're in need, N-E-E-D, once you're in need, you can no longer be God, because the need makes you have to want or desire something from outside of yourself. So you have to get an external source or force in order to assist you in dealing with that need. So once you're in that state, you're no longer God. Understood? So in order to retain Godship, the Nagarnadu could not be in need. Yeah, in order to retain our deity, we couldn't be in need. But they've put us under a spell that makes us pretty much in need of everything. Which is why the core message of all of these teachers that you're even seeing on the screen here, leading up to the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn that we have today, was do for self. Yeah, because there's a science of us as taught through Wu-Sabat, you understand? Which we were untouchable if we stay with our vibration on 7, 8, and 9 ether. They always will be of our own bloodline. So us existing or vibrating in those higher spheres, yeah, so if I find myself in a situation where I need assistance, I'm going to go to my brother or my sister to help me. Then I'm not in need, am I? My tribal member or you understand, the person who's part of what I am, you are me, I am you, you understand, through the understanding this science of a thing and all things are the same. Yeah, so you are me, I'm you. So if I'm in a problem, then if the tribe gathers round to help me, then I'm not in a problem again. I didn't have to go outside to somebody else. I didn't have to introduce finance, for example, from a party that didn't have my interests at heart, but maybe wants to exploit a scenario or situation to get the foothold in. You understand? And their thinking is not of us, it's for their own family, their own tribe, their own people. So this is a key science that has to be addressed. It's not about how these individuals, I'm not saying to say that you don't have to be an example of it, but sometimes we as a people, we tend to watch the wrong things. Yeah, but don't hold the Mokasu or the Kakasnadu to the same standards. Never held them to account for the same standards. Always making excuses for their behavior. There's a word in between there, which I'm not saying, so keeping it nice and clean on this class today. You understand? So for all their behavior, never held them to account. And yet there will be people amongst us who defend them. Understand? The Gad, the God, the guard, yes, will defend them, and that's programming. Because they don't do the same for you. They don't roll out for you when you're in an error or in a mistake. What do they say? Well, we knew there's something wrong with that individual. We knew there was something wrong with that person. So remember, it's not innocent until proven guilty. It is guilty proving yourself innocent in their system. They're because of monotypes, which they call stereotypes. Now, black man and woman, you're always capable of committing the greatest evil, but never the greatest good. And so this is why these books are necessary, and this is why they need to be taken to the world for this reason, to rid this virus, and we call it virus now, we can use modern terms, rid this virus from our system that is affecting our mind, our mental, our minds, as individuals, and stopping us, as I say, from working together collectively, or has been stopping us, and continues to stop us from being working together effectively. Understand? But it can't be stopped despite all of their efforts. Understand? Whether it was character assassination, whether it was physical assassination, whether it was attack the family, whether it was trying to make an individual work directly for them by way of COINTELPRO, informers and infiltrators. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that this class is still going on today. We have books around the world today, understand? And so the fight for the master teacher certainly continues, as in the great vein, a long line of others who have been killed, famed, assassinated, character assassinated in all different ways to try and stop the message that they were putting out was to help provide a solution for our people as the second resurrection, as it was known as today. So certainly take comfort, understood, that we have the ability, thinking about what we've gone through and where we came from, to even have this type of informed, from outformed into informed discussion on the platform today. Let's get into the class subject with that short introduction. Any questions?
No questions entered as yet.
Okay, right. So when we're talking to you about freaks and the perfect creature, I mean, if you want a few topics here. Okay, I see a hand raised. There, just at the corner of my eye. Right, and Habab.
Right. I see you, Valerie, with your hand raised. What I'm going to do, I'm going to allow you to speak. Your hand is raised. So if you have a question, you can now speak.
Thank you. Greetings all. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, yeah, go ahead.
Brilliant, yeah. Okay, well, just to say thank you for keeping up the good work, and I really appreciate the classes that you're carrying on by Zoom. So thanks for that, everybody. It's just going back to last week, really. It was about the Hathor. One of the pictures that you put up, she had 46 stars on it, and you said, notice she has the 46 stars. But I just wondered if you could explain what those 46 stars actually symbolize, because I didn't seem to catch that.
Yeah, welcome, Valerie, and thanks for your comments. So the 46 stars, obviously tying into us, would be 46 chromosomes of a human being.
Ah.
So therefore, we see the symbolism in the numbers there. Because, as I say, what we find out is that, there's a correlation, which we, again, probably in this class more to the next one, there is a correlation or a pattern that we see there that's in the stars, and it replicates itself here on Earth. Understood? So those patterns, when you're studying them, the reason in part, because remember we haven't been to those constellations and been able to inspect them, etc., etc. So that which we can't see, those patterns are very important. Understood? And so I suppose a shift in mindset for all of us is our doctrine is not trying to trick us, it's seeking to inform us. You understand? And so we have to shift the mindset to say, okay, what does that mean? And put those questions to the subconscious mind, and then those answers will come. You won't need a so-called teacher in that regard. You'll start to see it for yourself, and what you're then doing is just seeking confirmation of what you have received internally.
Yeah, thank you. I totally understand that, because it does happen in that way. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. No problem. Okay, so what we were touching about, as I say, what we were touching about was we were explaining in the first part about some of we've received the kind of watered down version. So what the Master Teacher, I think, has expertly been explaining to us and trying to stick into our minds, because one of the things when you're reading this stuff, it's interesting how each time it's like, as I say, taking to another level of how to see the same issues that are sitting in front of us. Understood? And as I say, when you start looking back at all this kind of famous, this kind of artistry and things that they kind of show us inspired from their own minds, if we were looking back and sitting back from it, a lot of the stuff looks crazy. So what they're calling paganism has been integrated into what we call monotheistic religion today, be it Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. We're getting the watered down version of really, what was taking place and what was going on. Do you understand? And so many times, as we was explaining, we didn't really get to see, as we should be as ontologists, of what really took place, what was the origin, what gave birth to what we're looking at today, because there's many layers before sitting behind these so-called religious texts, doctrine, so on and so forth, in terms of the names that we've used here. And so these, as you see here, some of the orgies, some of the rituals, that are taking place even today are still alive and well. Just because you don't see it on the internet or through your media, etc., they're still keeping up the worship of some of these so-called devils in the Celtic culture is still alive and well today. You understand? Taking place around, and they're allowed to quite freely practice these things in a modern society. Understood? But let one of these drill artists put on a concert, understood? Then all of a sudden, that concert's getting blocked, understood? Because of the potential threat, they say, of, these individuals from the streets of having a way out to not be in the streets. Yeah? So, but it's a Christian country. So you would have thought, yes, that basically they'd be trying to stop these type of festivals. So when they're ready to intervene and stop what they don't want to get forward, they do so. When they don't want to, they don't. Yeah, so it's interesting what they let go, yes, and what they don't let go. So there's a picking and choosing of what's taking place. A Friday night, probably most places around the world, but certainly here in the UK, people through drinking in pubs and clubs, etc., every weekend destroy town centres. Yeah, they go through a process of destroying a town centre. Whether that's throwing up on the ground, littering up the place, understood? Fighting taking place, there where police have to be called, blocking up and mashing up or flooding A&Es all over the country, yeah, through injuries from drinking. I was drunk, I tripped over, boom, banged my head, you have to go A&E. So all these things take place in this kind of crescendo over a weekend, and then the taxpayers pay to clean all these things up over the weekend, ready to get back to normal business on a Monday morning. Certainly it's how things were pre-COVID. It slowed down, but obviously to open all these things back up again, to get this money flowing in the system, they allow these things to go on. You understand? So they accept their own debauchery. They accept their own nature of doing things. But when others seek to get in on the act, all of a sudden, hey, we need to shut this down. It's a threat. This is dangerous. You understand? This is how the game gets played. Now, what is the perfect creature? Well, the perfect creature is dealing with the Nagarnadu, you understand, by way of the Sands people that were created, yeah, which all human beings descend from. Yeah, so they were perfectly created insofar as the environment which was set for them first, taking, billions of years to formulate. The planet is a child of the sun, hence why it is part of the sun, the solar system or the sun system. Yes, and so the environment, once it was perfectly set up for them, the seeds were placed in the waters of this planet, and we eventually grew or evolved, if you want to use that word, and came out of the waters, or they were placed in the Indian Ocean first, and then came out of the waters in the Akawango swamp in South Africa. So the perfect being that evolved or was grown from this single cellular life form that was placed in the waters, transported here by way of the dolphin, evolved and produced this perfect creature, which all other races have or come from, in this original source of genetics or genes. And as we showed you in this class before, they have the markers of the naturally occurring races. So the Sands people have the folded eyelid of the Oriental. They have the browed or bridged forehead of the Aboriginal. Yes, they obviously have the curly hair or tight curls of the Negroid. Do you understand? So these markers they have, and they have the indented chin of the Dravidian. You understand? So these are, they don't, you know, when extraterrestrials come along and they create beings or whatever, or beings in their image or after their likeness to establish a genealogy on the planet, you know, they're not stamping people with barcodes like they do cattle. Understood? These markers are being left there in the genes. You understand? So, but they don't have, for example, the colorless or iris of the Macassar or the Caucasian. They don't have that characteristic because obviously they came along well after and were an artificially created being, as we know that were created for the purpose of food, which we're going to explore in great detail today to see what's sitting behind a lot of these practices that you're seeing there in terms of the watered down version of them today. You understand? So what is the freak? Well, the freak, as we will explore, is the fact that, as we explained earlier, in their various different textbooks, they have descriptions of a number of different types of creatures, etc. And the question is, are they real? So they've appeared in, we know them from obviously movies, books, artists who have drawn images by way of paintings, which appear in, you know, many museums around the world today. But we're holding account, you know, those who follow the Quran, the Mohammedans. We're holding to account those who claim to follow Christ as Christians and their so-called textbooks that they follow. And we're holding to account the so-called Jews or Judahites and their textbooks. So you've got to explain, you saying this is the word of God, no problem, it's cool. Where the creatures you're mentioning, do they exist? Are they real? Because you're saying it in your books they are, if that's the word of God that you claim to see. So that's what the freak aspect of freaks and the perfect creature is dealing with. You understand? So let's explore some of this. So in part one, go back and check that out. We were just showing you some of the stuff that sits behind it. It's like the Druids or Druidic teachings, certainly the Celtic teachings, because one of the things that the master teacher pointed out, which is important, is that it's in a book called Let's Set the Record Straight. So maybe seek or check that book out, because what that does is it explores all of the different tribal names being used, like British, French, German, Italian. You understand all these various different names? So they say, I'm Italian. Okay, cool. You say you're Italian? Okay, cool. No problem. What does the origin of that go back to? Yeah, so they say, oh, well, it's Romulus and Remus, two twins that were raised by a she-wolf called Estrican. Okay. So Italians come from a she-wolf named Estrican. Is this true? Is this facts? Yeah, so when you start looking up the names, you'll be surprised that they don't relate to either what the person looked like or describing how they came from. You understand? If you really look at the term of Afafreye Ka'a, when you use the updated name in the new cycle information, you see it's telling exactly that. It says from the spirit or the personality of the sun. If you look at the word Sudan, it's saying land of two blacks, isn't it, in terms of its meaning? You look at the term Nigeria, or the word Niger, you understand, is in there, describing what the people look like. So, but when we start looking into the European names, it's not giving us the origin of where they came from. And so sitting behind that is the Celtics. It's a real tribal name for them. Celtics, Celtics, and Celtics. Celtics with a C, Celtics with a K, and then Celtics with an S. Yeah, and so when you start looking into the Druidic teachings, you see a lot of similarities between not only we're seeing the religious practices today, but also in terms of Euromasonry. I say Euromasonry, not Freemasonry as a whole, because we know those sacred orders come from ancient Egypt. I will touch upon again today. They come from ancient Egypt, but their stuff, they try to allude to ancient Egypt to tie themselves into divine, but their practices really got nothing to do with us. who don't know the real secrets. They don't know any of the rituals. Yes, we gave them 2 out of 9 and they created a 3rd. Yes, our ancestors at least were smart enough to not give them the real deal information. Hence why all of our stuff is shown in symbolism. And why we have to learn that symbolism, as the sister asked a good question there, Valerie, because it's there in code. The picture's in code. And to keep the knowledge away from the fool. This you already know. I'm not teaching anything you don't know. So we have to learn those codes again, because the average person's not really going to put that energy and effort in to really, really finding out what things are. And the more you are informed or read, so you're informed by Wu-Sabat, it's going to open your mind to see what is really going on. You understand? So the hundreds into the over 1,000 books that have been written have all been doing that particular process. Do you understand? Bring clarity to your perception of the way you see things. You understand? And in that process, I'm not going to use the word hopefully, but where you have placed or earned by way of your study some trust in your teacher, then you've allowed that solution to infiltrate your being and change the perception of the way you see things. So you're seeing your race's information as your source of fact that you are working from, and everything else has to be confirmed against that. As opposed to now, where you're learning something and then, okay, well, if I see it in, Encyclopedia Britannia, or see the word, or see this in a particular etymological dictionary, or I see it in a documentary or some other source, then now I feel like it's true. I'm not talking about if it's true. I'm saying that the feeling that it feels like, oh, that's confirmation. But as you know, well, how can that be confirmation? That's in itself its own another minefield, isn't it, to go into? Well, I have to get my stuff confirmed by another race who don't even know what they're talking about to then confirm what I'm saying is true. Yeah, so at what point, I use the word trust loosely because the master teacher not using the word trust, but I'm saying, at what point do you understand? Trust what he's saying, because every day we trust what the white man's saying. If I go to the supermarket, I pick up chicken, you trust it's chicken. If you know what I mean, you pick up a piece of fish, you trust that it's fish. The only way you don't have to put the trust in is if you raise the chicken yourself, or you grow the food yourself. Then you know exactly what you planted, when it was planted, when you harvested it, so on and so forth. So you can see ultimately where we have to get to and go to not have to have trust or belief in any other system. You have to do it yourself. And do it yourself means within our tribe, isn't it, of people. You see the journey where we have to go in terms of getting back to natural nature, natural living, in order to be actual factual, in order to be purely ontologists, in order to be factologists, in order to be truly numerologists, again, understood. So let's step in. So I think we got to this point at the end of part 1, where we had explained about the Druid teaching. You want more information on that, Millennium Part 1, a very good book to get into that level of detail, and it ties into Freemasonry Part 1 and 2, in fact, which I say should be available from your local bookstore. Now, we did touch on this in the last class, but we went to the end of the book because it was what we need to look at there. But here we're interested in this influence of what is sitting behind these monotheistic religions. And so we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. So we're going to look at Paarthurrak Atlantis. We're going to look at Paarthurrak Mind's Eye, because that's touched upon in Freaks and the Perfect Creature. And then look at Paarthurrak, the Ghost, as well. So a bit of reading today, and not my usual style, but we do a bit of reading today because it's said best from the words that we're looking at and reading, with some interjections. So you got questions, make it interactive. Please feel free to ask them. So any questions at the moment?
No questions currently.
Okay, so, excuse me. So let's work through just a few pages. Not going to go through everything in the book, but it's a few pages we need to look at. So, Partarak Atlantis, yeah, it says 1, Likum, my Merea Kharadu, beloved children, loves of my life, jewels of my Ayantwi, eyes. 2, there was much said about Matal Atlantis, the site of vacations. So we understand that, yes, the word itself, we used to go there on holiday. Yeah, so before the land masses separated, which Greeks refer to as Pangaea, at one time we used to walk over to what is known as the Americas today, which is Atlantis basically. And then obviously it was referred to as Alalan Twi. That Twi at the end, so vacation or double vacation spot. So the Twi means jewel. So that's North and South America, obviously, where those sites split. So there's no, I'm not saying it's not underwater, but the myth of the underwater when you're watching that, what are they called? Warner Brothers, the DC, that was it, DC movie or whatever. It's a hard watch because you see it's just pure nonsense that you're watching on the screen. But I'm not saying don't watch it, I'm just saying it's got nothing to do with the original. The original is much more simple than or the reality is much more simple than the myth. Yeah, so North and South America, we're talking about Atlantis today. Now, 3, it was told in, and then later, obviously, when separation took place, we used to sail there, obviously using the tides of how the oceans moved, and also fly over there on holiday. Understood? So our Egyptian culture is well in there in America, which we touched upon, so I think in the last class as well. Egypt of the West is what the certain sacred orders understand and still hold maybe secret today, which will be uncovered more as time goes on. Now, 3, it was told in the far-off lands that there was a time when Sabatat and Sa'at, Sirius and Orion were not apart from Pa Kawaktaha, the planet Earth, and Pa Patat, the heavens. 4, it was known that Sabatat, Sirius star constellation, was ruled by Satatu, female rulers. 5, it was known that Sa'at, Orion star constellation, was ruled by Nasatu, male rulers. 6, both were Natharu, agreeable. Wahanu, overseers, benevolent. 7, respecting each other. 8, so the 2 were joined. So we touched upon this earlier. Yeah? You look at our major monuments around the world that we have built, you see them aligned with those 2 star constellations. Yeah, Project 24, as it was known as in terms of the not the ultimate seeding of life here, but the us separating out into 2, say, single gender beings. Yeah, and the initial part of that, as I say, was conjoined twins as part of that original experiment. Conjoined twins. And then separated out into hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, and then obviously females and males. Yeah, but the woman still retains the male principle inside of her in the form of parthenogenesis there. So there's no, for us in that regard, yes, this is the origin of that story. There's no rib. There's a woman was taken from the rib of a man, all of that kind of stuff, which, as I say, to get into the geometry of that doesn't make sense as we know it to be. The lesser can't give birth to the greater. Now, 7, respecting each other. 8, so the 2 were joined. 9, and it was recorded, important term now, that these Natharu incarnated from the first of these 4 worlds 24,000 years ago and walked Kawaktaha, earth, ground, as Fad'u, guardians. Yeah, so we understand that the Thahut, people known as the Thahuti, yes, Ashtat, who they call Isis, Asar, Yes, who they call Osiris, what were extraterrestrials. You understand? They walked the planet, understood, interacted, and taught human beings, certain information they need to know. But obviously, as this is explained as well, they gave birth to as part of that project of seeding life here, as we are looking at right now. So I would say beings from Sirius, female energy, and beings from Orion, male energy, or DNA. Let's say replace that word energy with DNA. And so that's where our DNA, origin of our DNA comes from. 10. Whilst others who came to Par Kawak Tahat, the planet Earth, for other reasons of their choice, many were disagreeable. 11. And dwelt in caves and hillsides on the outside of the Majnan garden. 12. Where they used Homo erectus as laborers. 13. As they mined for gold. Yeah, so others came here for Earth's resources. Yeah, others came here for Earth's resources. As we see in their Bible, isn't it? God was interested in where there is onyx, bdellium, and gold. Yeah, in the land where there's onyx, bdellium, and gold. Yeah, Genesis chapter 2. 12. Where they used Homo erectus as laborers. 13. As they mined gold. 14. Parnatharu encompasses all that is and cannot be contained in caves. They were ruled by Parnathar Nasat Bar Ibis Bes of the little ones, sons and daughters of the Chamanu of the seas, brother of Ptah. Yes, so what happens is that the same way, let's help our understanding here. So if you use the term God, for example, it could be applied to many different depictions from different people's cultures, isn't it? So the Romans, for example, used the word God. Yeah, the Greeks used it, so it could be applied to, the Zeus, whatever, Neptune. All these different characters or whatever in their culture. The Hindus may use a version of that same term as the Christians and Muslims, so on and so forth. You understand? And so the term itself could have, if you emotionally are attaching to it and you use it culturally, you're going to see it as your gods. But somebody else now, if you use the term very generically, it could apply to many different individuals. So when one is saying overseer, for example, or overseers in that term, it can be applied to different individuals. Understand? So you have to pay attention to know who's being spoken about. Understand? Some are for, some are against. Now we use it in our culture as Nefara overseers. We know what we're talking about. Now the perception of that is that they are sons. But you have terms like Anunnaki and different things that would be opposed, some of them opposed to what we would be our perception of what the Nethara are supposed to be as agreeable beings, so on and so forth. You understand? But at certain points, those terms can be interchangeable. Yeah, and that's why it can seemingly cause confusion. So when we're looking at certain things, I have to pay attention to what's going on, because some Anunnaki, for example, who worked for the Parnatharu and were agreeable to their aims, or they worked with their positive aims, then they would be, in that instance, they would be positive. Understand? So it's not an absolute that all Anunnaki, for example, are negative, or all Parnatharu in the terms being used are agreeable or in that regard. So you have to know who's being spoken about and what's being talked about. When you have that understanding, then when we're saying Parnatharu, we know what it is, who it's referring to, and how our energy is being directed, because you have that knowledge and understanding of what's being expressed. Now, 14. So Parnatharu encompasses all that is, cannot be contained in caves. They were ruled by Par Nathar Nasat Ba'ah Ibis Bes of the little ones, sons and daughters of Par Chamanu, of the seas, brother of Ptah. 15. Par Nathar Nasat Ba'ah Ibis Bes, the protector, became the consort of Anat Hab, and she gave birth to Hathor. 16. Parnathar Nesat Ba'ah, the protector, was the first consort to Sachamtat. She gave birth to Nefertum. 17. Tar later, who's in the Sumerian culture is called Enki, later became the consort of Sachamtat. Together they birthed sons and daughters. The sons were first Amun, then Sakar, then Hap, then Sabak, then Emhatap, then Tahutwi. 18. Those were the sons born on Sabatat, Wu-Patah Nun, Wu-Tu Patah, Wu-Sachamta in times past. So this is a bit of a mouthful. But what's interesting here is when you look at the names here, 1, isn't it? 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. Yes? So they had 6 sons, this combination, Patah and Sachamta. They had 6 sons, and the 6th son is called Tahuti. Now, in the Sabaic language, isn't it? It would be Wahu, Athu, Thalu, Rabu, Hamu, and Satu. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If I want to say first, Wahu becomes what? Wahan, isn't it? Athu, which is 2, becomes Athan. Thalu, which is 3, becomes Thalan. Yes? Rabu, which is 4, becomes Raban. Hamu, which is 5, becomes Haman. And then Satu, which is 6, becomes what? Satan. Which they say Satan. It's not Satan, it's Satan. Meaning 6. It's got nothing to do with their definition of what they've turned that into. Yes, in other languages. But the 6th son was Fahutwi. Let's bear that in mind. We're going to come and talk about that a bit later. So the 6th son of this combination was, or the Satan son was Fahutwi. Now 18 says those were the sons born. We just covered that. So 19, each of their sons were guardians over creatures of Patah Nun. So Amun over bovines, Sakar over fowl lines, Hap over mammal lines, Sabak over reptilians, Emhatap over humanoids, and Fahutwi over simians, each in his own. Yes? So this is how our records recorded, yes, how life, I suppose, on planet Earth was governed, and then or these different strands of life were governed accordingly, understood, by this particular union. Now, what it does in 27, it switches it and says, okay, cool. But in the records of Mesopotamia, this is how they recorded it. Yes, so the perception changed. So let's let it explain itself. So 27, in the records of Mesopotamia, it was recorded on stones and scrolls. 28, that the offspring of Elohim were males and females of both cherubim, and sarabu, seraphim, who came from the skies. So these names, of what we're calling Parnatharu now, have got different names when we switch it over into Mesopotamia and how their records recorded the story. Yes? So, who came from the skies? 29, also were known as Moloch or Malek. 30, in the scrolls of the Habaru, Hebrews. So another change. It was recorded to put the blame on females for what Pacharabu, these cherubim, who raped them did. 31, for their wicked offspring of giants did in the earth. 32, it was told that a female made Parnatharu angry, and the Satar took himself back to the skies. 33, removing the right to Sa'at, Orion's star system, and Sabatat, Sirius star constellation, for the humanoids because of his disgust for the Sayatatu woman. 34. It was told that he, the male, offended the Sat Ba'h Ibis by imitating Parnatharu. 35. Yet these are all lies made up by the ruler of the Kharabu, Masa Kharab, the anointed cherub, who is called by many names and titles. 36. This became the lies of their beginning. 37. Thus was not right knowledge, the right wisdom, or right understanding, sound right. We know what next word is reasoning there. You understand? So this is how that story got changed, isn't it? Yes? Because, as you know in the story, they blamed the woman, Eve, yes, in the story. And then in Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, yeah, they were cut off from the heavens because it says, now then man began to pray. Yeah, and they were assigned one, according to their story, called the Lord. Yeah, called the Lord, which some say that Lord is Tammuz. But this Lord character, as we see from their books, is intertwined with the Jesus character, meaning that they're seemingly one and the same person in their story. Because in Isaiah chapter 14, chapter 14, they talk about the Halal being the bright morning star. And then we go to Revelation chapter 22, verse 16. We see that Jesus is the bright morning star. Yeah, so they have their own cherub or Messiah according to their story, yeah, and how they recorded things. And so what's happened is in the spell, we've got caught up in the revisions of the story in these different cultures, yeah, and not gone all the way back to how it was recorded by us and our people. And this is where the confusion comes in. You understand? Because obviously the truth, or an element of truth, is sitting there within these lies, which is why, if you think about it, the word lie, you know, how does that really tie in? I suppose if you follow it etymologically, and we look at the word, for example, in Arabic, where they mistranslate, isn't it, and call disbelievers kafirs. Yeah, but the word kafir, it means to cover. It doesn't mean disbeliever, it means to cover. So the concept of a lie was to cover over the truth in that culture, isn't it? Yeah, in Islam, to cover over the truth. So when you uncover the truth, yeah, you remove that which was covering it, you understand? Or lying over it, if you understand. Yeah, so in order to lie, they say you must know the truth. You understand? So for these stories to be then created, somebody knew, they didn't say they knew the whole truth, but they knew some aspect of it for it then to be changed. You understand? To make it look like, as I say, they have a connection to these original extraterrestrials who they know are responsible for seeding life here on Earth. Yeah? So you can see again here, this is showing how that matriarchal thinking came in, because here it showed them on equal footing, it showed them respecting one another, you understand? But they obviously were in their individual star constellations, which, let's be honest, these are tremendous in size. They're not small places where people are residing. You understand? There's thousands of planets. You understand? Hundreds of stars in these particular, thousands of stars in these locations. Yes, it's not a small area that we're talking about where our origins really comes from, and I say how the stories got changed. This became the lies of their beginnings. Why? Because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, what does it say? It says, in the beginning, God created. You understand? So beginning, yeah, which is a B. Beginning begins with a B. In that alphabet, B is the second letter of the alphabet, isn't it? yeah, which we explained to you before. And then if you look at the B, yeah, draw a capital B, and you take the back off of the B and you separate it, what do you get? You get the number 13, which we explained to you before. Those 7 periods or the 7 days is really responsible for 7 days, or they use the word yom in Hebrew. It means period of time. So 7 periods of 7,000 years, which obviously they were born on the 6th day in that project. Overstood? 7 times 7 is 49, correct? Yes. 4 plus 9 is what? 13. Understood? So it takes you back to that B, Bait, or the original house, but their house. Yeah, so it's a beginning for them in many beginnings when he started to write things down. Yeah, so that was the origin of his beginnings, when he started to pen things down, write things down and explain it, not giving the truth about how and where we really came from. So, 38, for the sacred records reveal the truth as Par-Hakat al-Hakakat, actual facts from Par-Natharu. 39, and all that happened was not told in Sadat truth. It was nothing more than Wu-Sabat, lies of the Mukfabu liars. 40, and many live by these lies from the beginning of the Rabantapal, 4th world, to the last 6,000 years, being under the Rakay Shalel Nawam, spell of sleep, or Tajhal, ignorance, to believe in whatever is passed on to them, to have faith and be hypnotized by the liars. Yeah, so when we talk about the 24,000, so it just we're clear on that. Each of the 6,000 periods, so these moon cycles into sun cycles, is also considered a world. So one of the 6,000 year periods is considered a world. So when we talk about the 4th world to the last 6,000 years, it's because one of these periods in that 24,000 is considered a world, as well as I say, a cycle that some on the call may know as a moon or a sun cycle, also the name for these 6,000 year periods. Any questions?
There are no questions entered as such.
Okay, let's keep it moving then. So, 41. It was a talk of the far lands. So it was a talk in the far lands. It is wrong knowledge. The edge of the outer people and their deities, Mudwa'u, evil ones. 42. Mortal men talked of Sipat of Anu, Heliopolis. Yeah, so Sipat is like gnome. You understand? Which they call gnomes, of which we know there was 46. Understood? Gnomes, but they spell it gnome as in Nomes. Yeah, gnomes, like a region. Understand? Like a town or a city. And actually, remember we showed you before, ages ago, a couple of years ago, I think in one of the classes we've done, the actual symbol for Sipat is the same symbol that they use in those X-Men movies. So the circle with the X, the Safaf from our culture in ancient Egypt, is the same symbol that they use for the X-Men in the X-Men movies. So this is the games that get played. So you get drawn in because the symbols being used they're real symbols to us. Yeah, so your soul is looking at it like, hey, this is reality, but all the story around it, you understand, Professor Xavier and all that kind of stuff, that's the lies, isn't it? But the symbol being used to lock, it draws the person in emotionally, isn't it? Okay, this feels real. Well, of course it feels real because they're using real symbols, just that the context is wrong. You understand? In that way. So that term Sipat or gnome, yes, is that Safaf is the Safaf for that is the X-Men symbol, and you see the games that get played. So gnome, we understand from our culture about the little people, yes, the Patahites, those Sans people, those original people. But remember, they in the inside the garden, you understand, inside the garden, a protected area, and those who were outside the garden were not allowed in to our environments where we were. We were protected. Understood? When we lived in that regard. Yes? So, but in Mukasu culture, they put gnomes, Gnomes, in what? Little men, yes? They put them in their gardens. You understand? So, but in our culture, the little people were in a garden, a protected space. But they now take the same word gnome and they have little men and they put them in their gardens. Yeah? And you ask them, well, why'd you do that for? It's even a film, isn't it? Nomeo and Juliet, whatever it's called. Yes? So they build mythology around these lies, isn't it? And then when you look at the word gnome, yes? When you look at it and you read it properly without the spell of the silent G or whatever, it says genome, which is Genomes. You understand? So it's earth, the earth gnomes or the earth cities or regions where human beings reside. And genome is talking about our DNA, isn't it? Which we know originally came from Orion, correct? And was placed in certain regions in Africa or Africa. From South Africa, we spread, yes? And how many of these sepats were there? Well, there were 46, isn't it? You understand? 23 and 23. You understand? Separated. House of the soul of Ta and house of the spirit of... House of the soul of Ta, yeah, and house of the spirit of Ta, separated, yeah, the 23 and 23 to make 46. So all this trickery, yeah, is what the master teachers had to spend years amongst us unpacking. Now, when the youth come in now to encounter Wu-Sabat, they can get the actual facts and the Patarak, etc., and just get it straight and just absorb it, you understand, from what it is, and to go into all that old stuff, so to speak, Ansar this and all that kind of stuff, not necessarily unless they particularly have interest in that side of things. Understood? But you may have been here for many years, have had to walk that walk with the master, and you see, as I say, how tricky everything is. Yeah, how tricky they've been. You understand? So this is the mindset, because the problem is you're not analyzing the nature of who you're dealing with. It's been played to us, but you know, when we think about it, we're thinking about the person that we know at work or the person we may have grown up with or whatever. We're not thinking about the nature of the race and who designed them and stepping back from that, thinking about, okay, well, the extraterrestrials who designed them, what were their nature and what did they program them to do? Yeah, because it's the nature of them that's the issue, you understand, and what's being expressed, or how, I think one of the triad once described it as, when they're being given certain names or titles, it's like, you know, if you think about a human being if you saw a lion, for example, that was not caged, you're going to be weary around the lion. Now, the lion could be cool. You understand? It could be civilized. You might be able to stroke it or whatever. You understand? But your first instinct is that this is a lion, and one, it's strong, and secondly, it could, whether it would or not, but it can eat human beings. No problem at all. You understand? It's not going to discern between antelope and human being if it gets the right opportunity to do so. So you're going to be wary around it. Yeah, because of its nature. Not because it can't be pet, it can't be, as we would use the word, domesticated. But because its nature is dangerous. And what the Masters obviously explained to us is that the television has removed the perception of danger, but the acts that have been done progressively against our race tell a different story. But television has programmed us to think otherwise, or even maybe the guy down the road, so on and so forth, has programmed us to see differently. So what you're getting the perception of is the Natharu perception, looking at how because they saw how everybody came around, how everybody grew, how everybody came into existence, and they're telling you exactly how it is. And their perception of what they are hasn't changed because they know what they are as well as who they are. And they're explaining to us, but our programming is constantly fighting against that. Well, it doesn't apply to all. You understand? Okay, cool. I'm not saying it does or doesn't. But we should be walking into a room, naturally instinct, we should be weary. And the question is, well, why haven't we got that natural instinct that, well, I'm in the room with a lion? Yeah, because as it's been expressed, we have trust in them. We have trust in them. Even if you say you don't, we have trust in them. That's what removes that, oh, well, I'm not in danger. Let's continue. So, 43, from whence they came. 44, from Anu toward the south. So Anu is a city, city of the sun, toward the south came the great mortals. 45, the great land of Remus, Rameses, and all felt them return. 46, out of the encircling Nile rivers, over at the lands they laid Napata and Meroe. 47, they were the mighty mortals, Sabatu, Enneads, Chamanu, Ogdoads, Tananu, reptilians, in those days and of their land. So we started off in the waters as these Chamanu, you understand? Yeah, as you know, 8 beings, you understand? Or pairs, male and female. So we started off in the waters, and then we came onto land. Yeah, we became Enneads, you understand? So they give you 9 principles or 9 beings as Enneads, understood? Yes. 9 months to birth a child, 9 centrioles in the sperm, understood? Yeah, that first those germs into one form to form a universe. So that combination, you understand, even the Ogdoads, they're depicted as 8, but they also even have a 9th member, understood, which is Atun. Understand? So even there, it's just showing the symbolism, or not even symbolism, but how we are recording our origins. Understand? So we're starting off in the waters, understand that, and then obviously from that water creature, those water origins, yes, the ovum is water-based, isn't it? Yes. The semen, as you see the word phonetically, semen or semen, is water-based, isn't it? Or the sperm, are water-based, coming in form of semen, and we move through the waters, isn't it? And then obviously, when they come together, it forms a being that then takes 9 months to produce. You understand? So when we sit beneath some of the events that took place, it then forms a system in place that as I say, still relates strongly with us today. So this is how we described those events that clearly facilitate life on this planet as we know it. 48, the old tablets and scrolls speak of these times. 49, their dwelling places were set in swamplands from whence no mountains arose. 50, in the lands of many waters before the separation of the landmass by the Mayetat waters. 51, when the 4 great lands of now were one land. 52, no Red Sea existed. 53, no Persian Gulf existed. 54, no Atlantic Ocean existed. They were all one land, Ganau. Yes. 55, then came the ice and waters beneath the land and separated them. 56, the lands of many waters. 57, so flowing to the north and from the south on into the Mediterranean Sea. 58, in the shallow lakelands among the mud out beyond the great plain of reeds. 59. At the place of many flowers, bedecking plant, tree in the land of Ukutat, frogs. 60. Where trees grew beards and were very tall. 61. And many had branches like ropes which bound them together, for the ground would not support them. 62. There were furushat, butterflies like birds, and ratulat, spiders as large as the outstretched arms of men. 63. There was much gold to be found there. 63. And the nahulat, bees, made the richest of asal, honey. 65. The toyurat, birds of the air, and the samukat, fish of the waters, had hues ever so nefamul, beautiful. 66. Which dazzled the eyes. 67. They lured mortals to that land. 68. Even Hashurat, insects fed on the flesh of mortals. 69. There were Fuyulat, elephants in great numbers, with mighty curved tusks, fur and curved tusks and fur great and brown. 70. This land had become two lands, and to its south were many small islands. Yeah, North and South America, we discussed this. So 71. Between them was the choice of Parnatharu to construct the most perfect schools of learning. Yeah, so we understand that the certain various extraterrestrials, yeah, Parnatharu, set up bases around the planet over. So when you look up things like those Nazca lines and you look at from above, yeah, even in Eatonton, Georgia, you understand, you think about Eagle Mound and these areas and places. This was a methodology, obviously, of like today, if you think about an airport, you would see that the airport has what they call runway lights, isn't it? So that it can be detected by the pilots in these passenger or other types of planes to know where to land, isn't it? Yeah. So in this sense, we were building these, what would be called? We're using iconography, you understand? Infographics almost in a sense, by building these particular symbols so that extraterrestrials would know, okay, boom, that's the school of the bird, for example. That's Yaanuwn school or Murdoch school. Yes, and so this is why these symbols were being used in this regard in various places around the planet, but we see that even today in Alalantui or the Americas. Now, here it says, between them was the choice of Parnatharu to construct the most perfect school of learning. 72. So the waters were named site of vacationing. It was a welcoming place surrounded by waters on all sides and became known as Atlan. 73. The way to it was between the two great pillars of the east. 74. It was invaded by the evil Homo canine beast of the fields who came from the northeast. 75. So Parnatharu departed, and in one great shadow hour of destruction, the two lands, north and south, from where it was seen, fell into the waters of the deep and were lost. 76. When the earth became born again by the sun's rays of light, called the next day, the lands were owned by the Nagaru Negroids from the east land of Africa, which parted from it. 77. And those who attempted to invade it, Kakasu or Kakasnadu Caucasoids, were driven into madness. 78. All was gone. Mankind, the Homo canine, clothed themselves in the skins of beasts and were eaters of flesh and drinkers of blood. 79. They themselves were food for their own overlords, Karabim, Anakim, Raphaim, Anunnaki of Nibiru Ki. So here, what is obviously being described is that they set up obviously certain bases in all over the planet, but in the Americas in this particular instance that we're talking about. And one of the bases was attacked, and caused a large nuclear explosion, understood, which then separated those land masses. So when you look at North and South America, understood, and look at the land in between them, yeah, this is as a result of an explosion that took place. This is where the Atlantis myth comes from. Of then, you understand, this obviously land then dropped below the seas in this regard. So it was these Mokasu that attacked, obviously, this area, and so caused this particular explosion. Now, here is explained to you about the origin of where they come. So they was food. They not only ate human flesh, understood, but their overlords ate human flesh. Understand? Their creators ate human flesh. This is where the nature of who they are coming from, as it says in their Bible, doesn't it? Yes, Genesis 1:26 through to 28, that they were created in the image and after the likeness of who? Yes, so the who that they were created in the image and likeness of, they had the nature of that individual as well. But with the religious thinking, yes, the freaks get the blame, but not the creator of the freaks. You understand? So if a freak gets produced, you understand? If a freak gets produced and it's gone wrong, then who is the freak to blame, or are the parents or the creators to blame? Just something to think about. 79. So they themselves were food for their own overlords. Karabim, Anakim, Raphaim, Anunnaki of Nibiru-Ki, the original center of Enlil city in Sumer called Nippur in Akkadian Mesopotamia. 80. If they did not offer their overlords offerings of flesh and blood as rituals of sacrifice of their firstborn and daughters to them. 81. They would be taken by night and never returned, for they became flesh and blood offerings for their overlords, Anunnaki, Anakim. 82. This was their way of living. 83. They did not bury their dead, yet left their carcasses on which the hellhounds feasted. 84. The dead laid about in their caves and hills. There was much disease, odor, and filth. 85. Until a creature was created to clean up the filth by breeding the roruz, rodent, rat, the kutut, feline cat, and the kulub, canine dog, to breed the khuzur, hog. 86. It was an eater of all things and anything. It was created to eat up the filth in the caves and the hillsides. 87. Yet the whole canine began to hunt, and Karud eat them as well. 88. Much sickness and disease for the Ba'h B'ah, the Caucasoids, and they invaded others, raped, killed, stole land, and claimed it as theirs. 89. And their overlords gave them a way to live. 90. These became clans known as what? Celtics. Their Kabalti, 2 tribes, were those of Saphir Farah, yellow fur, Zarek al-Ayantwi, and blue eyes, and those with Hamir Farah, red fur, and Khadir Ayantwi, green eyes. 91. They were given Wakan, Wiccan, and Druid rights by their overlords. Yeah, so the original religion they was given was Wicca, not the monotheistic religions that they've recorded their original story in. Understood? In the beginning, God created. Yes, they created a beginning, but the origin or religion of their beginning is Wicca. Monotheism is the watered down version of this. Yes? So they were given Wakan, Wiccan, and Druid rights by their overlords. 92. They gathered thee with what's called religion. This was an attempt to civilize them, yet this failed. So with all their resources, if you think about Anunnaki and Pleiadians, with all their resources, they couldn't civilize them. You understand? And that's how they're recording their story, isn't it? God could not civilize them. In fact, it grieved the Lord in his heart that he had made man. Or is it grieved the Lord in his heart, you understand, of the made man? Because he wasn't talking about all human beings. The made man, the grafted man. Yeah, made, not created, it says, remember? Made, not created. You create out of nothing, or grow things from nothing, which we know is no things. You make things out of things already here, or creatures already here. A grafted man. So with all their resources, yeah, bad boy Anunnaki, yeah, running constellations, different systems or whatever. Even we're going to get into the reptilians, how many constellations they ran, not lived in, they ran constellations. They could not civilize the being that they created. So again, you have to know who's being spoken about and not assume everything is talking about us. That's where probably the confusion comes in. The same way, even as us as human beings, not every thought that's flying through our head is our own thought. But if you internalize it and you accept it as that, you can take your life in certain directions, isn't it? Because you don't understand the nature of what and who you are at the same time. Understand? So let's carry on. So it's 93. They were given scrolls of laws to follow. Some did, others refused. 94. There was a war, bloodshed, rape, killing, and much flesh eating as the heavens looked on, giving them 6,000 years to roam free. At Genesis 1:28, it says, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And Quran, chapter 2, verse 36, yeah, or Surah 2, and Ayatul verse, or Ayatul 36. So the devil serpent beguiled them and made them slip. So we drove them out and said, get far away down from here, Adam, the devil and his fallen angels. Some of you will be enemies to and for a while. The earth shall be a residence and provide for you. So again, here we get one story in the Quran, one story in Genesis, and then we get another of the story in Quran. So again, when we're talking about, sort of freaks in the perfect creature, Muslim world, yeah, Mohammedans, cast down from where? Where were they cast down from exactly? What was the location they were in exactly? Today, yeah, because they said they got cast into the earth. From where? The location. So if everybody of the so-called new age religions have to confirm everything which we're saying, then you're subject to the same confirmation. Where exactly? You want details. How far is it from Earth? How do you arrive there? Yeah, because another freak or creature that's being spoken about is this creature that Muhammad rode upon, the Barak, that allegedly was able to traverse the seven heavens on. So what creature was this? And when we show you in part 3, we'll show you the pictures of what they have depicted this creature looks like. So again, to them, does this creature exist? And where's the proof? What was the origin of this creature? Because the creatures on Earth, for example, or the majority of them, can be traced. As we've explained before, as the master teacher has explained, when you look at a chicken, for example, the chicken is the midpoint, growth point, or evolutionary point, depending on what word you want to use, between where fish evoluted out of the waters, understood, and their scales transformed to become feathers, because they eventually became birds. Which is why a fish, which is a flightless bird, has scales, understood, but obviously it also has wings and the feathers, just like a bird has, but it doesn't fly. Yeah, so it's interlinked. So the Baruch that Muhammad flew upon, that was able to fly him into space, where is that creature? Yeah, what is its origin? How come it doesn't exist today? How was Muhammad able to breathe in space on this creature? How was Muhammad able to survive in his physical body? Yes, when as soon as you go into the atmosphere, you get frozen to death. Which is why when you see so-called astronauts, they're in what? Spacesuits. These are the questions, understood, that the master teacher is asking of these religions. Yeah, the double-edged sword, as it was classified as symbolically. Yeah, the ability to linguistic skills. Yeah, the ability to understand the translation and the languages that came before it. Leading back what? To ancient Egypt, the secret word or sword that was given to Haru by Aset or Ashtat and saying on Isis to keep to the end of time. Yeah, so don't let them get away with not answering these questions specifically when your soul is at stake. Because our soul has been on the stake all of these years. Yeah, gambling with these monotheistic religions, gambling our soul like dice. You know what I mean? Throwing it and then using belief and faith to hope what happens. You understand, when we die, when the truth is, let's say, much different to the stories which we now know, the lies, let's say, that they have created. Yeah, and it was in books. Now the television, the media, has taken over the casting of this spell that we've been suffering from today. 95, they were wild beasts and were eaten by wild beasts. 96, the giants with clashing teeth used them for bara, food. 97, a great horde of rats and hogs roamed and devoured everything so that mortals died. 98, the overlords, the Machach, Karad Uru, brain eaters, and sent Murmadu greys to hunt mortals and offer them as bara, food, for the Khatatu gods. 99, the brain eater, the Partananu reptilians of Draco's star system, called Draco Man, Leviathan, Dragon, worked with the overlords of the Caucasoid clans. 100, they were Kamau, Pleiadians of the constellation Taurus, called Luciferians. So again, actual fact, the cycles, and then the Holy Tablets, remember in chapter 1 as well, gives you Satanists and Luciferians. So you're now seeing, as I say, the definition of what we're speaking about. It's about Luciferians. We know that the Luciferians, obviously, their MO, so to speak, is mind control. Yeah, the Satanists are energy stealers. Yeah, so even here they have a certain type of nature, which one has to understand to see what's going on. Yeah, so when you look at the children, what we're seeing here, or what we're doing is stepping back, we're looking at the parents, yeah, or the creators, or their overseers or overlords, as being described here, looking at their nature and how it then sits in these individuals to know what they made. Yeah, and how they couldn't even control what they made. Yes? The Karabu children who became their Elohim, gods, Malakim, angels, their Rabbim, overlords, and their Kohanim, teachers. Yes, so as we said, sitting behind all of this is a group of extraterrestrials, understand? Which in these various different languages, obviously, yes, names have been changed. Just going on to explain. So 101, in time, names changed, and one Lahaj, language, became many Lasanat, tongues. Anuna became Anak, to become Elohim, to become Yahwahim, to become Rabbiun. 102, Adonim became to Rabbim, who taught mortals, who became Nabim. Then El Shaddai onto Allah, from Eloha, from El, and on and on. 103, this is the key verse. The overlord's true nature was washed from the minds of mortals. 104, they became gods, then of God, of Chafaf, fear, and Saduk, trust. 105, obey the God who is jealous, or you will end up in a burning hell's fire. 106, you'll be eaten by hellhounds. We just read about the hellhounds. Tortured forever. 107, this became a Za'am, religion, that ordered them to kill for us, steal for us. 108, slaughter animals to me. 109, pray to me. 110, steal others' lands for me. 111, I alone am God, obey me, fear me, or I will condemn you. 112, I give you 613 commandments, and those who break, and those you break. 113, you are my chosen, offer others to me. 114, have no others beside me, or I will destroy you, or by Nara, fire. So this is what we're reading about. This is what we're seeing. And obviously, one thing that it explains in the 9 ball, so we're going all the way back to 63. Yes, all the way back to 63. We're seeing here, it was explained back then, which we couldn't handle that information brought by the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn at that time. We couldn't handle it. He said, if you understand the nature of the Caucasian race, you will understand the forces that sit behind the Bible. Understand? Yes, because their God was what? The God was commanding them to go out there, clearly, and seek out lands where people was already living within. Now, the question that you have to understand with right knowledge is that human beings occupy 1% of the earth today. There are 6 billion of us on the planet. Back then, there wasn't 6 billion people. Human beings occupy 1% of the landmass. Yeah, so it's about 71% water, isn't it, the planet? And remaining 29 or so percent, which is land. Yeah, obviously includes ice, Antarctica, all of that stuff. Yeah, so the land, the physical land that we can walk upon, makes up 29%. We occupy today around 1% of the land. The point is, there's plenty of land to go around. Yes, plenty of land to go around. Plenty of land for people to live in isolation, if you're God's chosen people. But this God says, nah, we're not doing that. This God chose war over peace. This God chose stealing over providing. Yeah, this God chose killing rather than negotiating or getting along. So what the master is explaining is that basically, hey, you all pay attention to this, my children, my people. Pay attention to this, my race. Yes, this book that you have fallen in love with, that you've put your soul into. This is what it's really saying. Take off the beer goggles. Yeah, because you've been drunken on the lies of faith and belief. Take off the beer goggles and see what it is really saying. Yeah, it could have been done a different way. Even if God didn't have the power that they attribute to him as being all powerful, it could have been done a different way. But no, this God chose violence. This God was on smoke, because that's the nature of the beings who created them, and their children are no different. Do we see any difference today from the so-called chosen of God? No, they don't. The difference is that it is separated in this society by what terms? Legal and illegal. Legal and illegal. Yeah, laws. We have rules. They have laws. Legal and illegal. So I can sell you cigarettes legally, but according to nature's rules, they're going to kill you. You understand? But if I sell you crack, that's illegal. Understood? Yeah? And it's still going to kill you over time or over prolonged use. One is legal, one is illegal. According to nature's rules, you're both going to kill you over time. You understand? So they seek to absolve themselves by legal means. Yeah, so if it's legal and it's allowed, yeah, then that seemingly to them absolves themselves of that wrongdoing that's been done. Yes, but nature's rules don't say that. You kill a human being in a soldier's uniform because somebody ordered you to do so, that may be legal. But nature's rules still kick in because you took the life of another human being, whether justified or not justified. So these are the games that they play. So we're supposed to have almighty hate for the drug dealer who is selling drugs to his community, so on and so forth. You understand? If you see that to be the case, yeah, selling poison to their people, selling poison, etc., etc. Yes, and so we have a certain view of that. But we don't see the supermarket that's selling alcohol or cigarettes in mass in the same way. Because one is illegal and one is legal. But the effect on the human being, if they partake in that, yeah, the rules of nature don't adhere to legal and illegal. Either it's good for your internal system or it is adverse to that internal system. Do you understand? So just because McDonald's is legal and you sit there eating McDonald's and every day, in this society, they know that what they were doing was wrong, but did they go to prison? No. What they do, they find them and say, well, okay, pay out a certain amount of people who were lucky enough to sue. Yes, by way of a class action suit, and then McDonald's, to get away with it, introduces salads and tells you on the thing, hey, this Big Mac or whatever has got 2,000 calories or whatever the case would be. So if you put it in your mouth, you understand it's going to put 2,000 calories or whatever on your system. So you understand what you're taking, right? You do understand what you're taking. We gave you the information, so therefore you can't sue us legally, yeah, for the damage that it's potentially going to cause you, because you know now. But before we didn't, so that's why we had to pay you out some money. All within law, but still against rules. So there's a difference. You understand? There's a difference. So, and the nature of why this system, as I say, works for them and not for you. Yeah, which is why that master secret, why no help from above, is very important, because you have to understand we don't all have the same, yeah, that. Yeah, we don't have the same gods, and have the same deities. Everybody's got their own. And it goes back to who created them. The universal doctrine, if you want to ascribe to that affects all people, is the rules of the environment. That is the universal religion. Yeah, the rules of the environment, because it affects everybody within the environment, within existence. And you can't alter them or change them. That is the absolute, which is what people are getting confused with. Yeah, those rules and who put those rules in place, that is what they're getting confused with. You understand? Or what they're assuming is God or isn't God, which is this reactionary set of rules, which it doesn't play to what a human being's interpretation of good and bad is. The rules are the rules. Hence why we keep making the point that it doesn't matter if I'm using a lighter, for example, yeah, and I do the things necessary to trigger the rules to create fire, to light that incense stick, then the incense stick is going to light. If I'm in a room where there was a gas leak with a bunch of children in the room, you understand, and I light that lighter, I'm going to cause an explosion and kill everybody in the room. The rules are the rules. So they're going to create fire if the rules are going to create. Hence why witches and warlocks have same access to the power as, you understand, they're so-called priests, Kohen, you understand, they're imams, whatever the case may be. They've got access to the same power. It's nature. And as human beings may decide whether it's going to be used positively or negatively, it doesn't turn off because of the intentions of the person. Yeah, so this is the lack of understanding or the ignorance of how everything is set up within existence. Yeah, an expertly created system, yeah, which is self-sustaining or self-autonomous, and in itself, when you think about the universe in itself, is a life form with thoughts, feelings, thinking, etc., in its own right. So this, as I say, not only the ignorance, but as it's explained here, the true nature of what's been going on. You understand that, as I say, they were really was designed for subserviency to these extraterrestrials for their own intended purposes, has now been interpreted as some divine set of rules or orders that we have to adhere to and follow, when this is explaining that this is not the case. Any questions?
There are no questions entered.
Okay, carrying on then. 115. So this is how it was in time. Yes? 116. Their Haradu, children, wandered from the caves and hillsides like wild beasts. Yeah? So Derinkuyu in Turkey, remember, was one of their bases. Look that up. See, underground caves, they're very expertly built. You understand? Not, some random town or city. You understand? An expertly built underground city. Yeah, who built that? Or who helped human beings to build that? Go look it up. It's a if we step back from it as looking at it, we know what its purpose was. But you step back and look for it. It's a pretty incredible feat. Underground caverns, spaces, etc., built into the mountains, which we know is part of their whole separation thing to keep the clean lepers away from the diseased lepers, so to speak. You read about in their Bible in Genesis, actually Leviticus chapter 13 and 14. Now, 117, and both Sayeyu men and Sayetatu women, because of them, became stricken with diseases and leprosy that passed into their children's children, and sores covered their bodies, leprous bodies. 118, their once dark hair became colorless as their overlords, and its texture transformed from woolly to thin and flank. Straight as other beasts and yellow, it became farah, fur. 119, their skin is spotted, red and ruddy and transparent, raw flesh which swells up and bursts. Leviticus 13, 19 and verses 24. 19, and in the place of the boil, where there be a white rising or a bright spot, white or somewhat reddish, it be showed to the priest. 24, and if there be any flesh in the skin, whereof there is a hot burning and a quick flesh that burneth, and have a white bright spot, somewhat reddish or white. 120, it was as if flames consumed their bodies. 121, every one of them who had an issue of Zara'ah seed within them, and every one of their Sayetatu women who had flow of Daman blood could not give Tadlad birth. 122, their overlords ordered them to mix their seeds with the human gods, Nagaru, Negroids. 123, this must be done every 300 years in order to breed new Kharadu children, or they would die out. 124, their children grow up without instruction, having no truth of the past and know nothing about those they worship as God, Dios, Allah, El, Elohim, El Shaddai, Adonai, Theos, Lord, and Rab, and many other names in many tongues whom they call on in prayer. 125, their children's children turn to strange ways and akadat beliefs, each claim they are right while all others were wrong. 126, they became divided according to their tongues. 127, and formed Yasaru families, Kabalu tribes, and Za'amat religions world over. 128, most come down to the most important rule or law of kill for your deity, be it called offerings or sacrifice, wars, and judgments on others to execute. 129, doctors, nurses, and cremators all work to kill for their overlords. From a Sayeh man they call Abraham, Abraham, Ibrahim, all the way down to a Sayeh man they called Ahmad, Mohammed, Mustafa Muhammad Al-Amin. 130, they all teach of the same beings of light, fire appearing to them to give instructions to slaughter, kill, war, sacrifice, offer blood of living creatures to them or him. 131, their children of old, Ka'anu, Canaanites were lepers, flesh eaters, who worshipped a deity called Belial of Balim, headed by Basilbub. 132, Ka'anu or Canaanites became Kabalu tribes. 133, they were flesh eaters. Canaan Baal became Kanai Baal of cannibalism. 134, they dwelled many in the Caucasus Mountains. This was the land from whence man's kind came. 135, and the seed of the Nagaru Negroids of the garden knew to avoid these human beasts. Yeah, so we was around, when they were coming into existence and basically mashing up the planet, you understand, to keep it simple, which is why obviously in Revelations, isn't it, chapter 3 verse 15, it talks about what? The Ammon who witnessed the creation of God. Yeah, because we was around witnessing when they came around, obviously, and when their lords, so on and so forth, came into being. Yeah, in a beginning, not at the very beginning of things. A beginning. Yeah, within a beginning which people was already here. Yeah, hence his story versus prehistory versus our story. 136, their records were kept in Ramos by the wise one, the Hutwi. Yeah. 137, the people of the Far East called Mangalu, who came westward to learn from Asia. These Asiatic men, these Asiatic men, Asiatic black men, and Dravidians of South Far East came to study the arts of Ganor under Thahutwi, Vedi, called many names such as Galzu, El Khadir, Malachi, Melchizedek, the Ancient of Days, and Yaanuwn, the benevolent snake man of the deep sea. 138. Many came to Taha earth by way of the seasons and in the wisdom of the Najamats, the stars. 139. Having knowledge of the dragons of old. 140. As recorded on their own parchments of the wars in the skies and coming down to earth, the mixing of the seeds and the great deluge, the study of the mystic cube within a cube, which is talking about the opening of vortexes, hence the ability to transition or travel interdimensionally, or travel in an interstellar fashion, but by becoming a fast track to move between different universes. Now, 141, they all learn to cover their dead and how to prepare their dead. In the case of the old ones' return, to recreate, restore, or resurrect their great ones. 142, they learned how to mummify to preserve at least one cell to be cloned. 143, the real reason for mummifying bodies was to preserve the cell for later dates when Parnatharu return to Ba'ath, resurrect their offspring. You understand? So we understand that obviously we dealt with cryogenics at one time, you understand, which was freezing of bodies, but the cells deteriorate over time. Understood? So therefore they move to mummification, which is effectively air sealing or creating a vacuum around the body. But in the first instance, remember, they removed all of the elements within the body, all of the organs within the body that would liquefy over time and therefore rot, attracting adverse forces towards it. So they would remove the brain, certain organs, etc. Understood? Yeah, in those what they refer to as the canoptic jars, place them in there, and then obviously pack out the body with spices and different other things to prevent decay. You understand? So in trying out that body, clearly the Natharu on certain craft ships returning on certain orbits, or as we talked about in the last class, open up of certain gateways. When they return, if you preserve one cell, then clearly you're able to restore at least the physical aspect of the body, but not the soul or the ka'a. You understand? The spirit in that regard. You understand that? Obviously, there was a special ceremony called the opening of the mouth ceremony, which sent those aspects of self back to the star constellations from where we originated. Understood? Yes. So, and that's why, which is explained in Har Magaraj, if you want to seek out that particular scroll, as to why they packed the tombs with so much wealth. Yeah, because they understood when these individual beings were coming back, potentially you would need wealth to survive once you were resurrected, but you'd also need that wealth to pay for any potential operation or resurrection operation that would be needed for that time. Understand? So they understood about cloning in that time and kept the records accordingly. So mummifying or burying the dead in that regard also was done in that way because remember the disincarnate entities are attracted to those six evil forces. So the dead, decaying dead, are attracted to those forces. So in order to keep a level of not only physical but esoteric purity, you understand, then it was necessary to remove or preserve bodies in this way and form, because if the bodies are not done, remember that decay eventually will end. Those germs, remember, they will float into the atmosphere. Yes, human beings then breathe in those germs and then they become sick. So this is one of the reasons, again, if you remember in the Alt-Right Knowledge series, it's been explained to you that one of the reasons why a lot of craziness happens in cities, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, is because they build residential housing near cemeteries. Dead bodies, right smack in the middle of where human beings are living. So a lot of things that say seemingly innocently take place within a society are designed to enhance forces that are not necessarily easily visible to human beings. You understand? So certain practices are there to support or strengthen the forces of death or the dead. Yeah, as we see here, the extraterrestrials that are really here feeding off of human beings and their resources are not visible to, you understand, the human being's vision in that sense. Yeah, it's been created mystical, sit behind some veil or door, which they've done it in such a clever way that they don't hold the blame for any of their decisions out of fear. Yeah, so is it the person who gave the orders that you've got a problem with? Or, excuse me, is it the person who committed the act against you that you got the problem with? Or the person who gave the orders to order the person to give you problems? Should we have a problem with both? You understand? Yeah, should we have a problem with both? 144. They came to study under Vedi, or Jedi, the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, who are one and the same, three persons in one. Yeah. 145. Before all the dead were cremated, 146, and covered with potter's clay and hardened, so the beasts of the field would not dig up their bodies and eat their jasad flesh. So this is why 6 feet deep or more. 147. It was not the old custom to put the dead in a box or in shallow graves to be taken and devoured. 148. And some of the civilized Mokasu came from Hanabu Greeks, Kaptaru Crete, and Fanaku Phoenicians. 149. Who came to study with the great Thahutwi, the master teacher, who was cunning, a master craftsman in stone and the art of levitation, and cutting without the sound of the hammer, nor the sweat of the forehead, brow. 150. His students became wise as snakes, yet gentle as lambs. Yeah? And they of the Far East learned to carve fine images in wood, ivory, to weave silk from the silkworm, and each took back something to teach their own, to teach them. Understood? So, let's look at this. So, here, we see why is he considered to be the 3-in-1? Well, we see here in 24 Elders Master's Secret Part 1, we see 3 times 3 of these individuals. So the Greeks referred to him and the Romans referred to this individual as so the Greeks referred to him as Thoth. Yeah, 3 times great. Yeah, so but when we see the hidden meaning behind 3 times great, we see we see 3 different titles or names in the individual being to deal with, primarily, as I say, to deal with all of the ways in which the children of the Parnatharu today have been fooled and tricked. Yeah, and how we have the genes of all of these different mixtures in us because everybody was always seeking to get to the divine seed, so our genes became scrambled. So you need all bases covered, so to speak. Yeah, the Anunnaki stroke, the Natharu influences in there to deal with the nature of the beings that we have become. Yeah, not by choice. Yes, yeah, as hence the actual fact, isn't it? You understand? Showing the difference between who a person is, yeah, versus the what. Yeah, the who versus the what. We have become a what by way of the decisions that we made, but that's not who we are. Yeah, because the mixing, the kidnapping, so on and so forth, the bad information that we've been informed with through monotheistic religion, you understand, which has created the what. And Wu-Sabat is taking us back to the who. So, and then redesigning what the what is. So we see here the three key names here from various different schools aligned with that, as I say, that in that Amun-Nabab reactor, that vehicle or vessel, allowing, as I say, that them to design a religion or a way of life appropriate to this day and time to be able to break the spell. And many of you on the phone or have seen the information, how it's distributed, how it does exactly that. Yeah, how it breaks the spell. That's what it's designed to do, isn't it? Yeah, they say if you want to hide something from a black man, they don't say woman, but hide from black man, what they say? Put it in a what? So this individual spent an exceptional amount of time, yeah, building a team, writing books, so to address all subjects under and now above the sun. Yeah, so these individuals are the same person, aren't they, in the various different schools as that stories travel around the world and people have recorded the story, isn't it? Yeah. Now, interesting enough, you look here. Okay. So this is an old symbol, isn't it, on one of those Supreme Mathematics series of books. For those who can't read the mystery language there, this says, this is actually, I suppose, English as opposed to being in Sabaic, but it says mission Earth, isn't it? Yeah, that's what it says. But the book is about primarily, yes, about extraterrestrials. You read the book, it's about extraterrestrials, yes? But on the front cover, there's this symbol. Yeah? Not seemingly a UFO in sight. You understand? So, I mean, they didn't pick that cover for no reason. You understand? Now, obviously, this symbol here, the crown of life, is based upon a craft ship, isn't it? Yeah? You know, that human beings can turn to craft. Actually, shams look like crowns. But here we see these symbols that because we was ignorant of, or some of us were anyway, but maybe a lot of us were ignorant of ancient Egypt, ignorant of our Napatan story, our Moreau story, and where we came from. So our brains probably ignored these symbols. I didn't think, hey, master teacher, with respect, why have you got a book? You understand? Okay, on the front of it, it's got this, and then inside the book is seemingly talking about something different. You understand? Now, obviously, we're getting an understanding to know, well, who's really sitting in these seats that were being called gods and Allah and all this type of stuff. You understand? To see who is really speaking about. But the point here is that on this symbol here, which is a Ba'h, assuming the Ba'h, yeah, this solar boat or interdimensional craft, I'm understanding, this is clearly Horus, yeah, or Ha. We see a snake surrounding a sun with its tail hanging down. Now, religious iconography makes us feel and think, isn't it, that the snake is bad, isn't it? That's what's been drilled into us for those who were indoctrinated with that information. The snake is bad. And we see Horus here with with some depiction here. But who's this on the end of the boat? Who or what is this symbolizing? Yeah, because they talk about the snake, you understand, here, or the serpent, as we talked about earlier, isn't it? Yeah, the sixth son of Ptah and Sahamtat, the sixth son, yeah, Pa Satan, as they refer to it as the sixth son, was Thahuti, or Thahutwi. He was the sixth son. In their Bible, yes, they refer to him as the serpent. Now, they don't refer to that individual where they've copied the story from. I mean, it's not real stories now. They've copied the story. But they refer to him as the serpent. I mean, we look up the word serpent. What do they say? Okay, it gives the word nachash there. But they have interpreted the serpent as the devil. But they don't call him in the Old Testament or their Torah. They don't call that being the devil. That is what people have associated with the devil. It is referred to as the serpent. When you look up the word serpent, they say to whisper. The thing about whispering, in order to whisper, it denotes intelligence. Because an individual to whisper, they have to recalibrate their voice, yes, and lower it, not like some animal, ooh, ooh, like some dog barking, ooh, ooh, ooh. You know what I mean? As an animal, yeah, it doesn't have control. When it gets your attention, woo, woo, woo. Yes, a being with intelligence, or more intelligence than an animal, maybe say it that way, can calibrate their voice and lower it or make it higher based on conscious decision making. Overstood. So, as we taught in the last class, yes, the word mammal, if we're all mammals, the word mammal from the word mammalis, it means to breastfeed. Do men breastfeed? Do they breastfeed? So if they don't breastfeed, what are they? Do you understand? Hence, we have the brotherhood of the serpent in ancient Egypt. Who the head of that brotherhood was what? Who? Thahutwi. Because a man stands erect, to help a man stand erect, he needs a two-ball cane. The Caucasian women, in order to draw strength from certain Nagaru men, indulge in the practice of snake love. The reason why they're eating bodies out of cemeteries and all this type of nonsense is because, obviously, one of the ways to digest a person or individual's power, as they saw it, is to consume their genes, isn't it? So, because they perceive in that is power. So if I consume them, then does that being now become part of me to rid themselves of their ailments? You understand? So the practice of consuming something, because you are what you eat, correct? What you put on your tongue gets read, isn't it, by your matrix and becomes part of your being. That's why they say you are what you eat. And women understand, or should understand from reading the Lotus of Life at least, the science of the two mouths. Yeah, that it's not just the mouth in your face that you have to deal with, but you have to deal with the mouth between your legs, the Lotus of Life. And be careful what you partake in the mouth, because it becomes part of your being. You understand? So this is telling us a certain story where we have to step away from what the Mukasu says and they're thinking and snakes are evil or this, that, etc., because you're going to miss your story and what's being conveyed because of their fake religious beliefs and lies. Yeah, so Mission Earth, or how we got here, yeah, you see the Horus there, you see an erected symbol there, and on top of that, we see what? An Ankh, the key of life. Yeah, showing us how we arrived here, Mission Earth, how we got here. But who's this symbolizing on the edge of the boat? Something to think about. Yeah, so we have to review and renew how these terms are being used. Because remember, our orders existed and our knowledge existed thousands of years before any Bible even came around. And for the mistranslations to create misinterpretations, lies and falsehoods, which have dumbed down our intelligence where we're not thinking and reasoning anymore. Yeah, and how this individual, this master teacher, which is exactly what it says on the tin, master teacher, was a master at placing things and symbols and signs in positions all the way from 63 up until now, that the actual facts, Patarat and master secrets being taught now, was conveyed all the way along. So now when we go back and we're looking at certain things, saying, oh, bruh, I came giving you what you want so you would learn to want what I really came to give. But we were being given what we wanted, you know what I mean, because of the master's ability to teach. A unique teacher, never been seen in this, in this day and time, at least, in this day and time. Dimensional teaching. I'll teach you 9 things on one page. 9-dimensional teaching. Yeah, you break it down 9 ways and you don't even realize you're being taught 9 times because you're only cognizant of maybe the one thing based on what your limited knowledge is really seeing. As I said, a book about extraterrestrials, but on the front of it, what are we seeing here? Kadem Mukmat, they're ancient Egypt. Let's keep it moving. Any questions?
Yes, we have 2 questions. The first question is from Judith, and the question is 117 and 118. Is this talking about Nagar being bred into these leprous beings?
So remember, you've got, excuse me, we've got the red and ruddy, and then you've got the red and ruddy or the Adamites, and then you've got obviously the Canaanites with 2 slightly different things. Obviously, if at a certain point, remember, when you talk about the Canaanite side of things, they were bred out of us, isn't it? Yeah. So what the 11 sons of Canaan, remember, this was explained many years ago, that the 11 sons of Canaan are symbolic of 11 different graftation projects which took place around the planet. Understood? So there is an aspect where certain of us, not just our race, but others as well, were trying to breed what you would consider to be evil out of their genes and put it in a being. Now, the devil to us as ancient Egyptians was bad bacteria. So you need to put your phone on mute. Yeah, whispering there, the hootie. So yeah, but the you can hear, you can see. Sorry, the devil to us was bad bacteria. Understood? Microbes, certain type of bacteria, etc. Diseases that you couldn't see because basically you can't see germs, you can't see AIDS, you can't see coronavirus, for example. You can't see it. Understood? So exceptional hygiene, hence why that term they have in their culture, cleanliness is next to what? And then, so therefore, the adverse to that must be that unhygienic practices leads to diseases. Hence why there was a lot of derogatory names called of Europeans because of the way they managed their hygiene. Understood? So when you look at on the walls of Seti the First, and it shows you a version of the different graftation projects from the brown man, the yellow man, all the way to the ghost, they were trying to breed out this negativity so you could see it physically in a person. Hence the term germ man, German, germ man. So you could see these in a being that could physically be seen. But obviously those various different projects were not successful. So that disease on that lineage, yes, did come out of us originally, or in terms of those beings that got converted, had suffered the disease of leprosy. And then the result was, understood, a clean version of a leper. And even in their Bible, remember the 11 sons of Canaan, one of them was one of the sons was Nagaru or Negroid. You understand? Because out of that particular seed or gene. Do you understand? So even now, where they're finding certain genes, understood? Yes. And when they're drawing up these depictions, some of them they're showing, isn't it, as Negroid or Nagaru, but with straight fur. You understand? So obviously it can't be the origin of these human beings when they're finding Cro-Magnon, some of these others, Neanderthal, trying to think of some of these others, names have gone from me for the moment. But these basically findings where they really come from 6 sets of gene pools or whatever, and then the way they're then drawing up these depictions, they're showing them with straight flank hair or fur. So that's showing that there's a regression from the original, understood, yet to becoming to what they particularly look like. Now, as we will follow through some of these, as we follow some of these events through, remember their process of why they were given leprosy or why it was accelerated was to poison the food source, isn't it? So they were initially creating, on one lineage, these Pleiadians were creating an alternative food source so that they didn't have to be the food for these Draconians, understood? And then they diseased one of those projects, you understand, of these Adamites with the disease so that it would kill off those who had the taste for human flesh. You understand? So that's another aspect of how the disease was used, because they were weapons. If we putting it plain and simple, they were created to be weapons. You understand? In a war that took place, but this was a form of gene warfare. So say when they ate the food, it would kill. When they ate the food, which is human beings, it would kill them off. You understand? So the Adamites is, as I say, one aspect representing that graftation project. And the Canaanite aspect is the one where, they inherited the disease of leprosy, and that leproma weakened their genes and turned them, or created what you would classify today, I think it's an offensive term, but it's, I think in the West, the Caribbean, they say Dundus, or, an albino. You understand? Yeah. So created the albino because Canaan in their story was albino, wasn't he? Eventually, they became what we would know today as Caucasian. You understand? In terms of the pale skin and the fur. But the first stage of that was, what you consider to be albino. You understand? Where they've got, I'm talking about the albino, I'm talking about the pale skin. Do you understand? But they've still got the the curly hair, like the singer, I think Yellow Man, and different people of that nature. And as you see, I think vitiligo, there's a famous model, it's got vitiligo, you understand? So that's showing that process of leprosy or leproma being applied, you understand? They classify in the Bible as an old leprosy, but leprosy is a name really that encompasses a number of different types of diseases arising out of those graftation projects. So hopefully that's answered your question. Ask further if it's not clear. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another question from Valerie. And the question is, please clarify section 137. Magalu came westward to learn from Asia. These Asiatic black men and Travadu came to study under Jedtui. Are these the Chinese, etc., and the Indians stroke Sri Lankans? Who are the Asiatic black men? Where do the Asiatic black men live now? Thank you.
So, the real Asiatic black man is the real Asiatic black men, remember, are the Dravidians. So the or what we call Hindus today. You understand? So that is the Asiatic black man. It's not us as black people. It is Hindus. Yeah? If you look at even some of the Hindus today, their originals are black people, or black people with straight fur, isn't it? Fur on their head. Yes, that would be when it's all about the Mangalu or the Mongoloids. Yes, remember they came over by way of Hushen, isn't it? Traveling from China by the Bering Straits, isn't it? Yeah, across I suppose, into sort of Canada today, and then come down to meet us in North America today. So they would have encountered us as the Anasazi. Remember, we gave them certain information, even allowed them to mix in with us by way of controlled mixing. Understood? So the controlled mixing allowed us to mix with them, and we produced what's referred to as the Hopi American Indians. So that was the birth of American Indians, not Native Americans. The Anasazi, or us, who had walked over from Afafre Ka'au, Africa, on vacation, and then remained there when the lands got separated, yes, and even migrated there at other times, you understand, from South Africa. We were already there, so we were the Native Americans. When we mixed now with these Magalu or Mongoloids, that gave birth to American what they call today American Indians. How they became Indian part, however, is due to the fact that we only allowed mixing between us and the Chinese to produce the Hopi American Indians. And that was very strict system of one level of mixing, because we knew that the genes would deteriorate and it creates defects in the human genome overall. However, remember, they were sent down. They wasn't allowed to live amongst us. So they were sent down from North America down to live in South America. Yes? Excuse me. These mixtures. Now, other races like your Dravidians and others mixed in with them when not only they were down south, but they were sent out of the Americas as well, because certain practices that they were engaging with, which they inherited from the Mangalu side of the genes, you understand, like, cannibalism and different things of that, as we see with the Mayans, the overseers of that land at that time, us as the Anasazi, said, we're not having none of this, understood? So we sent them from the Americas down to places like Vietnam, understood? Which is why you see even in their architecture, you see some Anasazi type rulership on some of their totem poles and things of that nature. So the Dravidians mixed in with them in areas such as that, which then created an uncontrolled level of mixing, as well as obviously at a certain point then in South America, they also mixed in at that point. So it was uncontrolled mixing, giving birth to them further sub-races, which is where the Indian aspect comes in respect of those people. Hence why you see the kind of, who they're calling Latino, or Latins, not a people, you understand? And the sort of Native Americans, they're all, as I say, mixtures out of the same kind of original. They all come out of that original mixture of those Hopi American Indians, which was controlled mixing to basically rid the Mangalu of their of the Mongoloidism, because we had stronger genes. Understood? And so basically the rules were that they could obviously only mix back in with those with stronger genes, and those rules were broken. Hence you had the production of a number of sub-races on that continent. Some, as I say, we sought to, hey, let's get rid of that practice and, throw them out of the environment. Understood? But, once our rulership dwindled or waned, we wasn't controlling the borders in that way, so that system could not be maintained in that regard. Remember that we didn't have prisons in ancient Egypt. We didn't have prisons in the Americas. So you understand. So if people don't comply with the rules of what we set for our environment to keep the peace, we kick them out. Hence why in their biblical story, you see that grafted over as people being thrown out of heaven. You understand? Or kicked out to go and dwell, you understand, in another place somewhere. So we just said, well, you can't live amongst us. We're not engaging in those kind of practices. So we moved you out. We kicked you out of the environment. We didn't hold you in some kind of jail or whatever the case may be. Just said, you want to go and go on with them practices? We're sending you to symbolically a land of Nod. Go and live with the killers. Understand? And stay there. You come across our borders again, we take you out. Understand? So this is how we maintain certain things, but over time, as you know, those borders either not maintained or they got dropped. Hence why you get these mixtures and things of that nature. Also, in addition, you have to understand is that when you have a certain level of knowledge, you are responsible, as these Natharu were, you're responsible for managing the environment. So as you see, with even in what we've just read, you saw the creation of the pig. You understand that, okay, so we kick them out, they're living whatever, or not kick them out, but they're living in, there's other people who have created their various projects around the world, and they're not taking care of them the way in which they should do. They've just allowed certain creatures to roam. Yeah, they've done their little experiment, boom, done what they've done, they're gone. Some of them have come here, shouldn't even be on this planet because they're breaching rules even by being here, done what they've done, left certain creatures or whatever to roam, around the place. So whilst you can sit in your environment, and if people are living wrong, well, that's them, what they're doing, innit? So I don't even have to concern myself with that. The problem is if they're not living right, so in this case, not burying their dead, or somebody else is living a certain way and it's affecting, and they're not living right or whatever, and they're not maintaining the environment, what happens is the wind is going to carry diseases to where you are. Do you understand? So you can take a view of, we're not going to deal with them, or you can go out and civilize them. Yeah, go out and make sure that they're living within a reasonable order according to their nature, so it doesn't affect the overall environment, and therefore you're going to be affected because you are in that same environment. A bit like today. Yeah, there's a climate change issue, isn't there, with pollution. And Caucasians have built up had their industrial age. You understand? Built up their technology, made countless amounts of trillions of dollars or pounds or whatever in doing so, and then are now saying to India, China, you understand, and next I'm sure it'd be Africa, whoa, you're making too much pollution. Yeah, we got climate change issue. After you done built your wealth on mashing up the environment, they're looking at it. Well, we're doing what you done. You see what I'm saying? We're coming up the same way you came up, but now it's a problem for everybody if you're in control. So that's what you're seeing here in the various different combinations. We wasn't immune to the problems of the world. Yeah, we were a world power, and where appropriate, we helped different races around the world for everybody's benefit. You understand? Our issue was you're not living amongst us. That was our thing, because if you come in, you understand, you're going to bring our culture down. And so as a form of protection, remember, we're trying to stay on a certain level of vibration. So that's what you're seeing there. Some individuals came in, to study into the center and was invited in, then as it expresses, took their knowledge back to their people and taught them, understood. And in other places, as it teaches you, that we went out, understood, and taught people in their own environments, and had to send people clean up environments and then leave it in a state where it was manageable to the environment. And it's not saying that we can stop them from hunting or doing whatever, but at least control certain things in the environment. And I say, if they was in close proximity to us, still didn't want to follow certain things, then we might shift them out of our environment into other places, which happen to certain sub-races on the continent there, as we just explained earlier, one of them being the Mayans. Any other questions? Or if that's not clear,
yes,
ask further.
Yes, there's another question from Judy. So how did the Arawak and Tianos come about?
So so remember, when you're looking at those Arawak Indians, is again expressing what I've just explained. Remember, they're a combination of your Indians as in Dravidians, understood, combination here of some of these Mangala or Oriental, and then you've got us as Nagaru. Understand? Now, obviously, they're in a set of islands which are between where a lot of that damage took place, isn't it, as a result of the explosion that happened. So, as I say, there are a number of sub-races that got created from unauthorized mixing by way of these Hopi American Indians, which was controlled, a controlled form of eugenics, in a sense, to help out those particular Chinese. But as I say, it got out of control when we wasn't necessarily controlling all their borders. It wasn't controlling everything that these sub-races were doing. So the Arawaks they're cannibalistic in nature, aren't they? Tribes or whatever, which are seen to be the origin of the of some of the indigenous people in the Caribbeans, you understand? But as I say, their origin is really from race mixing between those three entities which I've just made mention to. So Nagaru, Mongoloid Mangalu, and Travadu in terms of Dravidians. More information about that, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, is in the book called Let's Set the Record Straight. Any other questions?
No further questions been entered.
Okay. Okay, right, so I'm seeing the comment there. Yeah. I mean, he could be sitting. But he's got a leg there, as I say, which to stand erect, he needs a two-ball cane. Now, what's the time? Okay. A lot to go through. All right, I'll do this one page and then we'll call it a day for today. I shut people's head. I've done a lot of reading today, so bit of a breather. So what we want to do is we want to understand, because what's happening is that we, as in me, all of us here, we're understanding a little bit about we understand about these Pleiadians and their role in creating what's referred to as the red and the white races. Do you understand? So the white version, obviously, known as, well, biblically, I suppose, known as the Canaanites, you understand? And then the Adamites is the red and ruddy race. And the word itself means red or ruddy, both transparent, do you understand? So we've got a grafted set of individuals, and then we've got individuals that became that way by way of a disease of leproma or leprosy, according to their story. And then both were used, you understand, in terms of a plot to poison the food, you understand? And the genes were diseased as a result, in order for that disease then to be triggered, by way of the mitochondrial DNA, because the disease was hidden within the mitochondria, DNA within those cells, designed to avoid scanning, or detection, and then trigger to kill off, as I say, these reptilians. So we're understanding a bit, well, who are these? Who are all the players involved, basically? So we need to understand who these reptilians are, because they obviously are the ones in control of the Pleiadians. And we also read about them controlling these greys, or Murmadu, understood, and they also used to go out and hunt food for them. Do you understand? In that regard. And all of these different dynamics and forces are sitting behind a lot of these titles that are being used. They're like Elohim and Lord or Yahweh's, you understand? All these different titles, Yahweh-him, you understand? All these titles are sitting behind these titles, which are related to certain incidents and events, as I say, that were taking place here on the planet Earth. A lot of which was not authorized. Let's be clear about it. You understand? So, and this is where you really have to start to understand our stories. And the Parnathara are not sitting there intervening in all types of events. Yeah. They intervene where certain things may be having an effect on existence. They don't necessarily get involved in the nitty-gritty of day-to-day decisions and day-to-day life. Now, human beings might think they're important, but in the terms of overall existence, they're not getting involved, and not necessarily, as I say, seeking to manipulate the course of fate in that regard. So we have to understand how it all hangs together and how it all works. Now, if something's causing not only problems on this plane, but affecting other planes, then they're going to intervene because it's causing, as I say, a problem in the environment. They're not necessarily going to get involved to be solving disputes between races or beings and different things of that nature. Do you understand? And if you really read our doctrine and the stories which are being conveyed to us, that's what it is expressing to you. Yeah, I think we shared or went through in some detail. I think one of the classes might be some of the early classes, the history, or one of those where we went through in detail Anu and the throne. Understand? So when the reptilians and the humanoid version reptilians, which we call the Anuna, called the Anuna, were warring on their planet, one of their craft ship planet referred to as Nibiru. Keeping the story short, remember that was affecting different galaxies, solar systems, etc. And so they intervened and put into place a form of succession where one ruler would be taken from the reptilian side and one will be taken from the Yaanuwn side to keep peace on their planet, you understand, within their environment, their craft ship, planet-sized craft ship. So he put the system in place to stop the warring, and it settled the issue of peace. Later down the line, they then got into issues, these two individual races in their environment, because somebody sought to usurp the throne. And they called in the Ethereans, you understand, these Nefaru, to intervene to solve this particular issue, because they couldn't resolve, I'm shortening the story, but they couldn't resolve this particular issue between the parties in this issue of succession. And so they called in the Ethereans, they looked at the situation, and they said, there's nothing to do with us, and went about their business. So they don't intervene in every situation, do you understand? And so we have to understand who are the players involved, and that we have the power as their children to make our decisions, you understand? And who we are, or who our nature is, or who we are going to align ourselves to, or who we're going to express that aspect of our nature, as we have, I suppose, the two sides in us at least, if not more. What way we're going to lean towards is down to our own behavior. And you're not going to know whether an individual being is sincere or not unless you put those tests in front of them and see how they truly react, you understand, to see who their children are or aren't. There's people who could look like you, but you understand, or look like us or whatever, but they don't exhibit the same traits. So the genes have been scrambled, so they can't tell who their children are. So therefore, certain things have been placed into the environment to see who gravitates to what, who really, put that work in, who really study language, study doctrine, who's really trying to bring us together as a people, etc., etc. So there's certain things which have been put out there to see, okay, well, who's who? Yeah, who's really sitting there? Which genes are really expressing themselves within this individual's body to see who is what and who is who. Now, certain times, in order to understand and control our nature, we need to understand our nature. So if you've got black devil in you, then you need to understand what a black devil is, so that when those certain behaviors or attributes rise up, it's your own exorcism that you need to perform upon yourself in order to deal with those traits. Maybe some of the misguided thinking is thinking I'm holy, or I'm a beautiful, good person. I'm not saying you're not a beautiful, good person. I'm saying, of course, we are, but you still got to have an aspect to yourself that you might need to check. You understand? Are people saying they've never gossiped, or they've never entertained gossip, or they've never listened to lies, or they've never liked, certain adverse behaviors in our nature. They've never told a lie in life. They've never ate food that was detrimental to their body and liked it. You understand? Yeah. I'm saying I don't eat pork, but I know what I know what it tastes like. You understand? Because we've been raised in an environment we ate those things. I don't eat red meat, lamb, but I know what lamb tastes like. You understand? And it wasn't you bite into lamb chops or whatever and immediately throw up, like maybe you might do now if you had a piece of pork or whatever. It tasted all right. But it's not, if when we're trying to live a certain way and trying to make sure that you don't want things in your body that are going to hinder your transformation process, then you may apply a certain level of discipline in our generations or whatever, these early generations, until you can raise the children in an environment where they wouldn't even, for maybe, or us for several generations, where we breed that nature out of us. Do you understand what I'm saying? For those negativity things or whatever. So some of the worst behaving are those who feel that they're righteous and good or whatever the case may be. Everybody has to apply whatever to their own nature. You understand? And so when you understand that causing the cause and effect is what's in your genes, then you have to analyze and know who's who are the players involved, and does it apply to me or does it not apply to me? a lot of the stuff we're reading about, when we're reading about the biblical stuff and all that, and we're having to look at those particular stories, it's got nothing to do with us. It's not talking about us. It's not relevant to us, but that's how the game got played. So we're being given it because of it's necessary for our growth. It's necessary to know who we are, but then also who everybody else is and their own nature. You understand? Remember, there's boundless, in the boundless universes, there is untold amount of information that we could be taught about and conveyed. Even in the short amount of time that the master teacher's been here, remember, you're given certain stories. You're given certain information that's relevant to our journey. You're not being given everything. You're given certain information that's relevant. You understand? And as it was expressed in the last set of classes, isn't it? As the master said, it's better to know it and not need it than to, you understand, than to need it and not know it. Yeah. Hence, we want to understand who's who. So we'll do one page of this and then we'll close out, take the last set of questions and then pick it up next time. So a lesson about reptilians. Let's see what this is saying now. So, 1, likum ay marura kharadu nwap. We know that's Wu-Sabat today. 2, the muhmam, humanoid beings of Aldebaran, pale skin, blonde, fur, blue, and grey eyes, made a home base in Sahatat, Orion, and came back and forth to the planet Earth. 3, to the Nordic type who are made by the Kamau Pleiadians, who also had a base in Aldebaran. 4, tall Muhmam, humanoid beings from Kamaat, Pleiades, 7 stars sun system, with transparent fur, transparent skin, pale white and transparent pale white eyes, are flesh eaters. So we've got 2 sets of beings in 2 locations understood who are fitting this description of what we call Pleiadians. Understood? So say Pleiades from Pleiades and talk about beings from Aldebaran. Here we explain there's 2, do you know what I mean? Different types in locations who get called their locations. It's the same like, this is just mentioned about the Arawak Indians. We've got Nagaranadu, who are in the Caribbean islands, correct? And we've got black people in the US. We've got black people in England. You understand? Now, those black people are calling themselves by the name of where their country is. Some of them. Do you understand? And so you can see where the same type of being obviously they're known by the place where they come from, understood, as opposed to what they are. Understand? So we apply this logic to what we're looking at, you're not going to get confused. I thought the beings that you said the pale beings were from Aldebaran. I thought you said the pale beings were from Pleiades. You understand? What I'm saying to you is now we have to start to use our intelligence, which is, on our own doctrine. We're staying in it, you understand? To really grasp it and understand it. So question. You understand? So for your understanding, you're not questioning to tear it down. Some may be, but most of you are not questioning. You're questioning to understand, and so keep those questions coming. Because the answers are here in our doctrine somewhere. 4, tall Muhmam, humanoid beings from Kamaat, Pleiades, 7 stars, sun system, with transparent fur, transparent skin, pale white and transparent pale white eyes, are flesh eaters. 5. These beings worked under the Ba'h Zahafu, the reptiles, or Ba'h Muzafu, the reptiles originally from Draco's star sun system. 6. All these and other beings came to Kawaktaha, planet Earth, over many thousands of years. 7. Some lived on land, others lived inside caverns, some beneath the water, while some stayed in crafts above. 8. In the caverns are many tunnels that were made and are being found today. It's mentioned one of those, Dirinkuyu. 9. And you had the Anuna who came seeking gold. most of us are familiar with this story. Yeah. 10, if not question. All was under the rules of respect by the Nathar, divine ones who ruled Orion and Sirius by way of other star system, also called Mozaku or Razaku, Riskians of Ilion of the 19th parallel universe to this one. 11. The most disobedient and rebellious was just one group of the reptilians. There are many species of reptilians. 12. But 3 main ones came to this planet Earth seeking food of a certain nature. 13. Now, Nwapu Nwapians, you are what you eat, and their nature called for Dawe, evil, spirited creatures, to eat you. Will be the same as seeking wild beasts for food, such as canines, wolves, felines, lions, grizzly bears. Those who were carnivorous for the nature in them, the wild. 14. They needed the flesh and blood and the best when the adrenaline is at its highest from fear, terror, and fright to them. That is when it tastes its best. 15. Over time, Parmuzafu, the evil reptilians, evolved on this planet, as well as near Draconis, the brightest star in the aptly named serpentine-shaped constellation of Draco, a Latin Roman word for dragon. You understand? So when one understands what they're reading, you can see this. Okay, the audio was lost from the beginning of reading from 4. Okay, let's see. Is the audio back? Just confirming, is the audio back?
I heard everything from 1. Yeah, your audio's been fine.
Okay. Okay, cool. So if you missed anything, just remind me. I'll read it again. So the point is that this particular bit here, it's when we say reptilians, we know that there are multiple species. You understand? Obviously 70 or so species, and obviously we're talking about a certain group within that group who obviously are causing, you understand? Yeah, trouble. You understood? Within the group. So, and then obviously here, you want to know why our society and even the Bible, so to speak, and these other books are written a certain way in terms of the nature of how God is moving, so to speak, is because they're looking for a certain type of outcome. You understand? Yeah? So getting adrenaline seasoned human beings, yeah, or in this case the Mukasu, that culture is designed not only to manage the production of the food, but to get it to its kind of optimum flavor. Understand? So they can derive as the energy and nutrition, as they would see it, physically and esoterically, for their vibration that is feeding and fueling their particular appetites, let's say. Now, obviously, to us here on one planet, you know, the way we, I suppose, for those who are meat eaters, the way we raise livestock on this planet in various different guise or forms, you know, are we not doing the same thing? So are we not, to those life forms, you know, if they could communicate in a language that we could understand, what would their view of human beings look like? You know, chickens, cows, lambs who are led for the slaughter, certain type of seafood, etc., etc. So we could look at this and think, man, this is bad, but obviously we're not moving at the moment, or certainly the way in our perception is, we're not moving and thinking interplanetary. Yeah, because we're locked in, as they say, trapped behind the 9 ball. We look at everything from planet Earth's perspective. But somebody else knows out here looking interplanetary. To them, they're not seeing it as a big thing to create a being and use human beings as food, which is at one time, if you remember, on this planet, but it was separated obviously into the red and green zones. Yeah, those great lizards or dinosaurs or reptilians, human being was in the menu, on their menu, comfortably. You understand? And obviously, our ancestors helped to protect us by making sure we were in certain environments being raised, and there was a force field set up to make sure, Jurassic Park style, those great lizards, couldn't get in, as they would have ate us quite happily, until they obviously intervened and sent a large meteorite strike to take them out, because they was, running amok even on this planet. Understood? So don't throw it out into some kind of spooky, situation. You've got to analyze and see, hey, this is the origins of what was taking place around a lot of these things, and what we've been left with is the watered down, I can't even say even kindergarten version. Yeah, we've been left with the spell-bound version of what really took place. Do you understand? And now when you go back and look at it, you see it right there in front of your eyes. So this is how you know you was under a spell, because you go back and you read these things and read them for what they are. You see exactly, it does say that. Yeah, it does in Malachi chapter 2, the last verse of Malachi chapter 2, it tells you exactly what's being expressed here. Yeah, that evil was good into the sight of the Lord. Doing evil was good in the sight of the Lord. Explain that. Yeah, and these Levitical priests who were basically, or in their Bible at least, the Levitical priests they were the guardians of this. You understand? Which takes you back, say, to those Celtic tribes and what the priests were really designed for. You understand? To gather the food, etc., and make sure. So they were the chosen of God, but messing up their own people, as they would see it as. You understand? Because they knew what those rituals, etc., were really for. You understand? And some of the and where they were raising children for a very specific purpose, for example, to be food for God, so that everybody else could live and chill. You understand? Which creates that kind of another version of your Messiah type story, isn't it? Yeah, a willing sacrifice. You're raised for a certain reason. Understood, yeah, to become food, yeah, for these so-called overlords or extraterrestrials, so that everybody else can live in peace. Yeah, because otherwise they just come along and take people. So you work out an agreement so that it's not the Wild West out there, but controlled West. Understood. Okay, I think that's enough for today. Any questions, closing questions before we close this out and move this to a part 3, I think this is?
Yes, we have one question from Emmanuel. His question is, the question is it that those that eat meat will be eaten as meat?
Not particularly. Well, the reason why we don't eat meat. The reason why we don't eat meat is basically, originally, remember, the structure of our body, our colon, for example, we have a very long colon as human beings. When you look at most carnivores, for example, they have a very short colon, so that any kind of poisons in the meat are extracted out of the body in quite quick fashion, to end up poisoning the individual that is eating the flesh. So we are naturally, I suppose, more designed to be herbivores. However, because of gene mixing and various different things, we are more omnivores as opposed to herbivores. So we are a combination of the two, really. So meat eaters and vegetarians in that regard. And so obviously even now you see the shift in the 4 generations that most people born after 1970, if they were to run their tongue along their top set of teeth, they'd probably find they've got incisors, short fangs, because we've morphed as a result of, say, eating meat over a certain period of time. So the reason why we have a set of type of meats that we eat, and that's basically white meats or whatever, not blood meat, so chicken, ostrich, turkey, these type of things, for those who still wish to eat meat, is so that basically there's nothing in your system that would hinder your transformation. So we tend to have very generic dietary advice that's come from the master teacher over a number of years. And this is because some people could be on this call, whatever, they could be fine eating certain types of things and it wouldn't dissuade their transformation, it wouldn't hinder it. There are other people, because of certain genes and the way they're configured, it could hinder them. So therefore, because we don't know whether that would hinder you or not hinder you, or that would be, you'd be fine, or, you understand? If you did eat it, generic advice is given across the board so that basically the safest option is just not to do it. You understand? So rather than to let's say, alcohol again, for example, if you're not drunk, then you're fine. But if you do get drunk, you risk you take the risk of in-housing external forces into your being that are not supposed to be there. So therefore, the advice across the board is just don't drink. Understood? And it's the same in that context. You're talking about dietary behaviors. So coming back to your question, and then a person can detox. So you could eat something if you knew the right thing to do. You can remove that thing from your system by taking the right types of things and then flush your system. You understand? So again, this advice given is generic across the board. Now, just because you eat meat doesn't mean that they're going to eat you. What you do see, however, and this was in the latest update that you might want to check out, released in October, which was basically why you see pork on a lot of the menu, because certain groups of extraterrestrials like that taste within us as human beings. So you see in Caucasian menus, okay, your what we call English breakfast over here is pork. There's pork in a lot of different things. Pork throughout certain things in society. There's pork in certain toothpaste. There's pork in things that you wouldn't even expect it to be in. Understood? So if you eat the things that they like to eat, you understand, and that you are what you eat. So if that forms part of your system, then you will become food for the gods. And if you're undertaking the practices that they are undertaking, then yes, you will be considered to be food for the gods because you got that taste for them. Do you understand? But if you adhere to what's been laid out for you as a child of Parnatharu and live that way, then you remove that risk. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying you remove that risk. Yeah. So by you're not then cultivating yourself into something that would be men on the menu. Understood? So this is why we would seek to make those changes to create a clear distinction between them and us. Because remember, the Parnatharu have left certain things in place that the Mukasu is doing. So they allow a McDonald's to exist so that people can overeat, or whatever it is, KFC and the different fast food joints or whatever. Because their thing is this, okay, cool, that's what they're up to and that's what they're doing, but we don't want the obese or do you understand? We don't want them. We don't want them either. So we'll leave that route in place. If you choose to go down that path and you end up, then that's going to kill you off as well. You know what I mean? But if you can find the discipline to make those changes, then that's not the path that you're going to go down. But if you follow in their image, remember it talks about stay in their image and after their likeness. If you follow after that image, then you're going to inherit their fate. So that's what that is making reference to. So no, not just because you eat meat, that puts you on the menu, but if you're eating a certain type of meat, then it's going to put you on that menu. And today, as I say, certainly in the Western Hemisphere more so, the reality is that you're picking between different evils, aren't you? They're going to put stuff in that food to make you violate certain things, and certain vices come along the line. Remember, they were using, even today, they use reconstituted blood in certain instances to make certain foods, everyday foods that we may find delicious, you understand, or like, or whatever, you understand? So that's therefore you were told, stay away from certain things. Dark sodas, for example, or chocolate, things of that nature, things innocently, which we would have been kind of drilled, you know what I mean, from a young age. Certainly if you're poor, or you come from a poor background or poor environments, these things, because you couldn't afford them when you was younger, they're seen as luxury things. Yeah, and some of the time we act based off of how we was raised as children, or what our parents did or didn't give us, you understand? And then spend a lot of time playing out the things that we wanted to do or felt we would have wanted to do when we was kids. And what was really that? Was that because we wanted to do those things, or was that the Caucasians looked like they were living such a great life? Now we're there. Now we're doing Caucasian things. Yeah. Now I'm sure black people are now going into restaurants with a bit of money now, and it's not the done thing to order the steak well done. Yes, because black people with their steak, the steak's black. You understand? Now, today, you don't want to embarrass yourself because apparently these high-end restaurants, you got to order it medium rare and rare. So you're now into the blood eating with everybody else. Yeah, because you're in a high-end restaurant now. We've got money. We're in a high-end restaurant now. So the issue is that we're becoming more like them more than we realize. There is no distinct separation. Yeah, unless you're really on this, this Wu-Sabat. That forms a choice. These modern religions, they don't provide a choice because they're part of the multiple choice with the games and the tricks. You understand? Whether you're calling upon the names of deities, which is linking back to the people we're speaking about here on the screen in some way, shape, or form. You understand? And even the way their religious principles are even set out, it's not providing you with that latest kind of up-to-date information that's showing you how to navigate through all the stuff which is going on at the moment. So no, you don't want to do the things that put you on the menu. You understand? But more importantly, it's not having things in your system that when it comes time for nature to aid as well as your own application of spiritual practice, when it's time for you to transform, you've got something in your system that is blocking that. So it's, I suppose, prevention better than needing to be cured or needing to be detoxed at that point. So certain things you're just advised to stay away from. I'm not saying you can't eat it. Obviously, it's all choices. Any other questions?
Yes, it's sort of a follow-on question from Emmanuel. What about consuming fish?
I mean, it's not off the menu, seafood, but it's told to be in moderation. I mean, ultimately, I suppose your journey is one of to get to not eat meat. I suppose that would be your ultimate journey. But I say I'm not a nutritionist, but you'd want to take that journey at a certain point, because remember, your body's used to, if you've been eating this stuff for years, your body's used to certain nutrients that come from that particular food source. So if you remove it in a way that is not smart, then you could get sick. Yeah, so fish is seafood in moderation, but you have to understand again, a lot of the waters of the ocean, have been poisoned, with mercury and other substances. So you have to be again mindful. Remember, there was a big accident that took place in America where all the oil was let into the waters, causing significant years of environmental damage. So that's some of that. If the food's coming from Atlantic Ocean, certain places, it's going to have those poisons in. So yes, seafood, but again in moderation. Any other questions?
Yes. Well, we have one here in the chat. It says, are we ever going to have classes in a room with you and others? I really miss that. You are a very good teacher. And that's from Maruf.
Well, thank you for that. We're made to look good by the quality of information provided by the master teacher, and obviously the sacrifices made by the administration who put these books out. Yeah, probably in some way, shape or point in the future, but it's still coronavirus is real out here. So, we're not going to take risks where we're putting members of the public at risk in terms of certain gathering. So I'm sure it will go back to, well, I say sure it will. Depending on certain things, I think we will go back to some form of that in the future. But for the moment, we're just keeping you all safe. So I know certainly in New York, they've stopped some gatherings for that reason. And so, we'll be guided certainly by that to make sure, as I say, nothing happens to individuals as a result of these particular classes. But we will be back to that at some point in the future, no doubt. Thanks for the question. Anything else?
No, there are no further questions entered, Nababkat.
All right, so I probably went on a bit too long, but I think we'll finish this. We need to cover, as I say, Bartarak the Ghost, Mind's Eye, and then we're going to just talk about the collagen, the amazement of collagen and its role in the interconnectedness of us as human beings, and then we'll explore a little bit of this freaks a bit more in some of the religious doctrine on that side of things. So hopefully we'll get that done by the next part in 2 weeks. No, I think it's more than that, actually. I think the next class is the 7th of November. So October's a bit of a long month. So 7th of November is the next class. So this time and explore those issues. Check out the YouTube channel. Hopefully we'll get these the last class and this one out by the weekend coming, so you can just look over some of the stuff and then, as I say, ask more questions in the meantime. So thank you for joining us today. Much appreciate your attendance and the questions that you've asked today. So appreciate everybody participating, and we will see you on the 7th of November. So everybody just take care and stay safe. If you do have questions in the meantime, I think I provided an email address linked to the Zoom platform, so you can send questions through, and we'll pick those up in the meantime. Okay, everybody take care. Sabians Wadu, everybody else Wadu as well, which translates as bye-bye, in all intents and purposes. So we'll see you soon. Take care.